Greetings my dear wizards, witches, muggles, and squibs. Welcome to a very special episode here on the Spellbook Chronicles. A longer, more detailed episode. But today, no popcorn or butterbeer. Today calls for something stronger. Superior Red, straight from the infamous Malfoy apothecary. Today, we shall delve into the history of a very select group of wizards, the Sacred 28. A list, a legacy, and for some, the heaviest of burdens. Oh yes, according to the author of the Pureblood Directory, the 28 British families were still considered truly pureblood by the 1930s. From the Black family to the Malfoys, from the Lestranges to the Gaunts. Each lineage was bound by blood, wealth, and often a sense of superiority. But also loyalty, courage, and a big heart. But where do we place the Weasleys, the Prewetts, the Longbottoms, and the Ollivanders? Today's episode is packed with names and history. Let's hope my Ravenclaw memory's up to the task. If not, perhaps a sip of wine will refresh it. Purely for academic purposes.
Of course.
Before we begin, tell me, which of these 28 families is your favorite? Which one do you most identify with? Let me know in the comments. And for now, cheers. I meant, let the episode begin.
In the early decades of the 20th century, long after the Statute of Secrecy had reshaped wizarding society, there were still those who believed that magic itself could be measured, catalogued, and, above all, purified. It was in this climate that a peculiar book began to circulate through the drawing rooms and private libraries of Britain's oldest wizarding families. Printed, at least in its earliest editions, anonymously, bound, without ornament, and written with the cold assurance of someone utterly convinced of their own righteousness, it bore a simple title, the Pure Blood Directory. Its purpose was never a mystery. The book claimed to identify the last families in Britain whose bloodlines had remained untouched by muggles, muggleborns, or squibs. 28 names in total. 28 lineages, presented as uncontaminated, unbroken, and therefore superior. The author would call them the Sacred 28. Few doubted who stood behind the work. The language, the obsessions, the quiet malice threaded through its pages all pointed to a familiar figure, someone who, in those years, had devoted himself more fervently than most to the propaganda of pure blood supremacy. Cantankerous not, a man whose faith in blood purity bordered on devotion, and who, in the shadows, was among the most fanatical supporters of Gellert Grindelwald and his war. Nott's directory was never intended as a historical record, nor as a celebration of wizarding heritage. It was a political manifesto, a blueprint for what its author believed the new world should become, and soon would. To be pure blood, according to its rigid doctrine, meant having no trace of the non-magical world in one's immediate ancestry. No deviations that might, in the author's eyes, dilute the gift of magic itself. Untainted. An ideology that drew heavily from the darkest centuries of wizarding history. The Middle Ages, when witch hunts, inquisitions, and the dominance of religious dogma over magical knowledge had driven hatred of muggles to its historical peak. Many of the oldest and most powerful wizarding families welcomed Nott's manifesto with open arms. The Blacks, the Lestranges, and a handful of other ancient lineages not only endorsed it, but lent their influence, and, in some cases, their wealth to ensure its circulation. Through their efforts, the directory reached far beyond private libraries and drawing rooms, spreading so widely that some argued it should become an official record, sanctioned by the Ministry of Magic itself. Many of these noble houses guarded their genealogies with near religious fervor, recording each marriage and birth, and erasing, with haughty contempt, those deemed unworthy. Rules were absolute. Marriages could only unite those of pure blood stock, or at least those without muggle, muggleborn, or squib ancestry. Obedience was considered a sacred duty, a guarantee that their lineages would endure, untouched and untainted by the outside world. And yet, in their pursuit of perfection, they sowed the seeds of paradox. The very dogma meant to protect them would, in time, contribute to their decline. By the end of the Second Wizarding War, with the Dark Lord vanquished and the Old Order fractured, the number of truly pure blood families had begun to dwindle. Inbreeding acted as a slow poison, gradually drying up each branch of those houses, once considered the most noble and powerful. And it is here, at this threshold, that we begin to retrace the history of each of the Sacred 28, exploring the smaller, lesser-known families in brief, while delving deeper into the stories of the great houses whose names echo most loudly through wizarding history.
Of Romans, wood, and mastery.
In the history of the wizarding world, few names evoke prestige and mastery like Ollivander. The family's story stretches back to 382 BC, when the original Ollivander arrived in Britain, bringing with him knowledge and traditions from a land where olive trees thrived under the Mediterranean sun. According to some historians, a village not far from ancient Pompeii. His arrival marked the beginning of a lineage devoted to an art both subtle and profound: wand-making. At that time in Britain, such skill was possessed only by druids, who nevertheless relied on a more primal, unpredictable, and imprecise form of magic. Garrick Ollivander, the most recent custodian of the family's secrets, traced his ancestry to those early settlers, believing that the family had arrived alongside the Romans, setting up stalls and later a permanent shop to supply the wizards of Britain with instruments of magic. Through the centuries, the family honed the art of wandcraft to an extraordinary degree. In many ways, we owe to them the very conception of the wand as we know it today. They discovered, for instance, that only a minority of trees could produce wand-quality wood, just as only a minority of humans could wield magic. Years of experience were required to discern which possessed the gift, though the presence of bowtruckles nesting in the branches provided an unmistakable clue, as these creatures never inhabited ordinary trees. Geraint Ollivander, active in the Middle Ages, recorded these distinctions with meticulous care, leaving writings now considered by the family as cornerstones of their craft. It was Garrick Ollivander, however, who brought the art to its pinnacle. He selected and defined what are now known as the Supreme Cores. The 3 wand cores he considered the finest, and the only ones fit for his wands: unicorn hair, dragon heart string, and phoenix feather. Though the Ollivanders were counted among the Sacred 28, their story carries a quiet irony. Garrick himself was born to a Muggle-born mother, a fact that would have been unthinkable to the purest eyes of Cantankerous Knot, whose directory had placed the family among Britain's unblemished lineages. Perhaps Knot never knew, or perhaps he simply overlooked what he could not reconcile: a family whose devotion to the craft of magic surpassed the narrow dogma of blood purity.
Of rats, cruelty, and revenge.
Among the Sacred 28, few families carry as much weight and as much menace as the Lestranges, an ancient pure blood line born in France but firmly rooted in Britain. They intertwined through marriage with the Rosiers, the Blacks, the Malfoys, the Tonks, and even the Lupins. Wealth and influence were inseparable from their identity. Their vaults at Gringotts overflowed with treasure, and a vast repository lay hidden beneath Paris, beneath the silent stones of Père Lachaise cemetery. Like the House of Black, the Lestranges built a reputation on ruthless mastery of the dark arts. Legends whisper of a Lestrange ancestor in Normandy who, it is said, summoned plague-ridden rats that devoured the streets, leaving a city in terror and disease. The family clung fiercely to pure blood supremacy, scorning Muggles, Muggle-borns, half-bloods, and any member who failed to uphold that principle. Their emblem, a black raven, symbolized vigilance and loyalty. Only male descendants were recorded in the family tree. Women were reduced to faceless flowers, nameless, ornamental. Their motto, Corvus oculum, corvi non eruit, a crow will not pull out the eye of another crow, served as a grim warning. Betrayal within the family was unthinkable, loyalty absolute. One of the darkest chapters in Lestrange history unfolds in the late 19th century, under Corvus Lestrange IV. Ambitious and ruthless, he set his sights on Lorena Kama, a French-Senegalese pureblood already married, determined to secure a male heir. Using the imperious curse, he forced her to bear his child. Lorena died in childbirth, leaving a daughter, Lita, who was scarcely acknowledged, for she could not continue the Lestrange name.
I need a boy.
Corvus remarried, fathering the long-awaited Corvus Lestrange V. To protect the boy from rivals and from possible attacks on the family, he secretly sent both children across the ocean, hoping to keep them safe. Yet fate was cruel.
Yes, Father.
A violent storm sank the ship carrying them. In a quiet act of vengeance, young Lita swapped the newborn with the child in another cabin, who, tragically, was swallowed by the sea. The Lestrange legacy, marked by ambition, cruelty, and dark deeds, would endure through generations. In more recent times, the name is best known through Bellatrix, born Black. Her story, dark and unforgettable, will be recounted in the chapter devoted to her house.
Oh, my valiant adventurers, I bring you news that shines brighter than any Loomis. 3 enchanted tiers: Curious Wanderer, Enchanted Explorer, and Master Adventurer. The room of requirement? Nothing but a broom cupboard in comparison. With us, you'll gain early access to every episode, a secret Discord server to keep you ahead of everyone else, and that's not all. Priority replies to your comments, a direct channel to help you choose new content together, and even exclusive wallpapers taken from each episode. And it doesn't stop there. For the bravest among you, extra videos with my director's notes and reflections on the episodes already released. Because, let's be honest, you can never get enough of your dashing wizard adventurer, Quentin Pettigrew. Click join below for all the details. Joining the Spellbook family is a small gesture that supports our journey and allows us to bring content truly worthy of our audience. So thank you sincerely from the bottom of our hearts for being here. And you muggles listening in, I beg you tell me, what on Merlin's beard is a Discord server supposed to be?
Of roots, suffering, and courage.
Among the Sacred 28, few families carry the weight of history with as much quiet grandeur as the Longbottoms. In medieval Europe, they amassed unimaginable wealth, serving courts across the continent as both mercenary captains and master enchanters. Their influence stretching from the crumbling castles of France to the bustling courts of Italy. Their legacy was one of power and prestige, tempered by a sense of duty and honor. By the modern era, the Longbottoms remained a pure bloodline, intertwined with the Blacks, the Yaxleys, and the Abbotts, and connected more distantly to the Weasleys, Crouches, and Potters. They preserved their heritage without falling prey to the obsessive pride in blood that consumed so many of their peers. Tragedy struck in the 20th century. Frank Longbottom and his wife, Alice, served the Order of the Phoenix with unmatched courage. Their dedication to protecting the innocent brought them into conflict with Voldemort's most vicious followers, and they were captured, tortured, and broken, confined to St. Mungo's, their minds irreparably damaged, leaving their young son Neville in the care of his formidable grandmother, Augusta.
Toad again?
Neville's childhood was quiet, yet overshadowed by fear and uncertainty. Magic awakened slowly within him, and his early years at Hogwarts were marked by awkwardness and missteps. Yet in herbology, he found his strength. Guided by Harry Potter and the daring of Dumbledore's army, Neville emerged not merely as a competent wizard, but as a hero. In the final battle at Hogwarts, he destroyed Nagini, Voldemort's last Horcrux, and turned the tide of the war. Survivor of 2 generations' horrors, Neville went on to become Professor of Herbology at Hogwarts. He married Hannah Abbott and settled above the leaky cauldron, where they live a peaceful and, above all, happy life.
Fainted.
Of blood, curse, and defiance.
Like most ancient houses, the Greengrasses long espoused the philosophy of pure blood supremacy. Yet their history would come to be defined less by ideology than by a curse. At some forgotten point in the family's past, an ancestor was struck by a blood malediction, an affliction woven into the lineage itself, dormant for generations, lingering like a sickness in the shadows, resurfacing when least expected. In the modern era, that curse manifested most clearly in Astoria Greengrass, who would later marry Draco Malfoy. Frail throughout her life, Astoria lived with the quiet certainty that something within her was slowly failing. The malediction did not rage or burn. It waited.
Mom?
After the birth of her son, Scorpius Malfoy, her health began to wither, as though the curse had finally claimed its due. Marked by suffering and an unusual clarity, Astoria rejected the dogma of blood purity that had shaped her upbringing. Despite her origins, despite being raised among those who prized lineage above all else, she refused to raise her child to believe that Muggles were inferior
to others.
It was a choice that strained her relationship with her in-laws, Lucius and Narcissa Malfoy, but one she upheld until her death on a pale summer morning in 2019.
Of purge, violence, and dogma.
Among the Sacred 28, few names inspire the same unease as the Carrows. A pure bloodline, celebrated not for ancient prestige, but for an unflinching devotion to the dark arts. The family's origins are shrouded in mystery. Some trace the name to isolated rural settlements, where magic was practiced harshly and without oversight, far from the scrutiny of wizarding institutions. Others suggest a darker connection, linking the early Carrows to the era of Matthew Hopkins, the so-called Witchfinder General. While Hopkins hunted witches in the Muggle world, some scholars speculate his campaigns may have masked a hidden conflict among wizards themselves, a purge of the impure carried out by the Carrows. By the 20th century, the family had fully embraced the most extreme ideologies of their time. Long before Voldemort's rise, they were fervent supporters of Gellert Grindelwald, serving the cause of wizarding supremacy with zeal. This devotion reached its most notorious expression in Amicus and Alecto Carrow. Both fought in the First Wizarding War and later joined Voldemort's Death Eaters, ultimately returning to Hogwarts in 1997. There, under Severus Snape as the new headmaster, they ruled through cruelty. Amicus corrupted defense against the dark arts into a study of pure violence, while Alecto turned Muggle studies into a source of propaganda and manipulation, indoctrinating students in pure blood supremacy. However, with the Battle of Hogwarts and Voldemort's fall, the Carrows, like so many loyal Death Eaters, were dragged into the icy cells of Azkaban, leaving their house's name steeped in infamy. The Abbotts were a quiet, unassuming branch of the Sacred 28, their roots in Godric's Hollow stretching back centuries. Known for their steady hand with magic and a certain Hufflepuff gentleness, they rarely sought glory or power. Yet even the calmest houses could not escape the shadows of the Dark Lord. In 1996, Mrs. Abbott fell victim to Death Eaters, leaving a deep mark on the family. Her daughter Hannah, a Hufflepuff of the same year as Harry Potter, shaped by loss and courage, went on to fight in the Battle of Hogwarts. She later married Neville Longbottom, became landlady of the Leaky Cauldron, and eventually trained as a healer, beginning work as a matron at Hogwarts.
Miss Abbott.
The Fawleys are a minor, somewhat enigmatic family among the Sacred 28, known less for magic than for politics. Hector Fawley, a Ravenclaw of the late 19th century, would rise to become Minister for Magic.
It's time.
His flamboyant character a stark contrast to his taciturn predecessor. Yet his charm could not shield the wizarding world from rising shadows. As Grindelwald's revolution loomed, Fawley's inaction drew criticism and whispers of negligence. Though re-elected, his time in office ended in 1939, replaced by the more vigilant hand of Leonard Spencer Moon. The Shacklebolts, though listed among the Sacred 28, were a family quietly at odds with the notion of pure blood supremacy. Kingsley Shacklebolt, the most notable of their line, rose from Auror to Minister for Magic during the turbulent years of the Second Wizarding War. Known for his unwavering sense of justice, he often stood apart from his peers, embracing allies labeled blood traitors and defying the rigid prejudices of his ancestry. Among Harry Potter's principal mentors and friends during his early years as an Auror, he remains to this day the last of his family known to the Ministry. The Slughorns, listed among the Sacred 28, were a family who valued their pure blood heritage, yet harbored little of the rigidity or prejudice common among their peers. Wealthy and well-connected, they moved easily through wizarding society, always at the center of its social life. Through lavish gatherings, influential acquaintances, the Slughorns forged alliances and cultivated contacts that ensured their power and prestige endured. Horace Slughorn, perhaps the most famous of their line, served as potions master and head of Slytherin House, both in the 1940s and, decades later, in the turbulent 1990s. Orphaned and alone, he carried the weight of his family's legacy, yet remained ever attuned to the subtle currents of influence and friendship that had defined the Slughorns for generations.
Forgive me.
The Selwyns were a distinguished pure-blood family, counted among the Sacred 28. Their reputation for refinement belied a darker streak. Whispers tied them to the Ashwinder crimes of the late 1800s, and a century later, to the Death Eaters of the Second Wizarding War. In the past, one branch of the house gave rise to the Umbridge family. The Crouches stood among Britain's oldest and most distinguished pure-blood families. Respected and well-connected, bound by marriage to names like Black, Yaxley, and Longbottom, they moved with ease through the highest circles of wizarding society. Yet beneath this polished facade lurked darkness. Bartemius Crouch Jr. fell into the dark arts, while his father, a formidable ministry official, tried to hold the family in line with an iron fist, keeping them from Voldemort's shadow. That fragile balance shattered when Junior, having escaped Azkaban, murdered his own father in 1995, a crime that ended with the Dementor's kiss. With that, the Crouch line vanished entirely, leaving only the tragic story of their fall. The Macmillans were a long-standing pure-blood family, counted among the Sacred 28, with 9 generations of unbroken lineage by the 1990s. Though tied by marriage to the staunchly prejudiced Black family, later Macmillans, like Ernie, Harry Potter's companion at Hogwarts, defied the rigid hierarchy of blood, forging bonds across divides and fighting for justice as members of Dumbledore's army, carving out their own legacy. The Burkes were a quietly sinister branch of the Sacred 28, their pure-blood roots entwined with the Blacks, Flints, and perhaps even the Malfoys. Notorious for their dealings in shadowed corners, they co-founded the infamous Borgin and Burke's in Nocturne Alley, a shop that concealed within its walls a bizarre and grotesque assortment of dark artifacts and relics.
Fascinating.
And among the Sacred 28 are the lesser houses of Shafiq and Travers. But even the Flint, Avery, Bulstrode, Parkinson, Roll, Knott, and Rosier families, noble lines, proud and ancient, bear a familiar shadow. Almost all embraced the philosophy of pure blood supremacy, bound by tradition and often by ties to Slytherin House itself. Many walked darker paths still, pledging loyalty to the Dark Lord as Death Eaters, a stain on their history that the wizarding world is still not ready to forget. These names, however, are only fragments of a far wider tapestry. Beyond them lie the longer, intricate chronicles, the houses whose influence endured across centuries. It is to these families that we now turn, not merely the most powerful, but those whose choices, ambitions, and transgressions proved decisive, shaping and reshaping the course of wizarding history itself. Their actions did not simply reflect the world they inhabited, they helped forge it, for better or for worse.
Sonorous. Attention, attention, breaking news! The brand new Spellbook Shop has finally opened its doors. In our shop, you'll find treasures to make even the shadiest nocturne alley merchant green with envy. T-shirts, posters, booklets, and much, much more. To visit the shop, click on the tab above, follow the link in our bio, or head to the store section of our YouTube channel. Or was it YouTube? YouTube. That bizarre muggle contraption, you know what I mean. And let it be known, dear viewers, your support means the world. Every purchase helps sustain our channel, letting us share new stories and fresh content. So, from the bottom of my heart, thank you, Spellbook family.
Of Slytherin, obsession, and death.
Few wizarding families can claim a lineage as ancient or as burdened as the House of Gaunt. Once powerful and immensely wealthy, the Gaunts traced their blood directly to two of the most formidable figures in magical history. Salazar Slytherin, one of the four founders of Hogwarts, and Cadmus Peverell, bearer of the Resurrection Stone, and one of the original masters of the Deathly Hallows. They are also the only known bloodline capable of speaking Parseltongue, a gift that, according to many historians, links the family, long before Salazar, to Herpo the Foul, the earliest recorded Parselman. Some suggest that Herpo's ability may have been inherited from his mother, said to be a Gorgon, perhaps even the formidable Medusa herself. For centuries, the Gaunts regarded themselves not merely as pure bloods, but as the purest of all. Their obsession with blood supremacy surpassed even that of the Black family, rooted in the belief that their ancestry placed them closer to magic's divine origin. In their possession were two relics of extraordinary power, the locket of Salazar Slytherin and Slytherin's wand itself, said to be among the most powerful ever crafted, surpassed only by the Elder Wand. Yet greatness bred division. Over the centuries, internal strife and bitter disputes fractured the family into two branches. One branch remained in Ireland, clinging to older traditions, while the other settled in England, where the locket would eventually resurface. Slytherin's wand, however, stayed in the ancestral homeland, passed down through generations like a cursed inheritance. By the 17th century, it had come into the hands of Gurmla Gaunt, a witch as fanatical as she was formidable. When her sister Rhianach and Rhianach's husband, William Sayre, were accused of betraying the family's creed by aiding nearby muggles, Gurmla showed no mercy. She burned their cottage to the ground, killing them both, and took their daughter, Isolde Sayre, imprisoning the child for 12 years in the hope of molding her into a true heir of Gaunt purity. Isolde eventually escaped, fleeing to the New World with Slytherin's wand in her possession. There, she would go on to help found Ilvermorny School of Witchcraft and Wizardry, alongside her Muggle husband, James Stewart, an act that marked a definitive break from the Gaunt legacy. Gurmla pursued her, driven by vengeance, but met her end before reclaiming what she believed was hers. Isolde, unwilling to wield the wand that had defined her suffering, buried it in the earth. From that spot grew a snakewood tree, resistant to destruction. Its leaves, later discovered, to hold powerful healing properties, a final, quiet defiance of the cruelty from which it sprang. Of Isolt's twin daughters, Martha and Rhionac Steward, the fracture of the Gaunt bloodline became complete. Martha, a squib, married into the Pocomtuc tribe. Rhionac, bearing the name of her murdered grandmother, chose never to have children at all. Desiring the extinction of a bloodline she considered irredeemable. The English branch of the Gaunt family, like its Irish counterpart, continued to uphold Salazar Slytherin's supremacist philosophy, nurturing hatred and disdain for anyone even remotely associated with Muggles. Through their lineage, they were linked to the infamous Peverell family via Cadmus, though the details of this union are shrouded in confusion, blending folklore with fragmentary historical records. What is certain is that Cadmus's resurrection stone, set in his ring, was passed down through generations as a family heirloom. Ironically, over the centuries, the Gaunts completely forgot the true nature of the stone, unaware that they carried one of the most powerful magical artifacts ever created. Being direct descendants of Salazar Slytherin, the Gaunts also held knowledge of the Chamber of Secrets. In the 1700s, a proposal to install elaborate plumbing at Hogwarts Castle threatened the secrecy of its entrance, which still retained its original form: a concealed trapdoor and a network of magical tunnels, located exactly where a girl's bathroom would later be established. Corvinus Gaunt, then a student at Hogwarts, took it upon himself to protect the entrance, hiding it behind plumbing fixtures and a sink, the very spot that would centuries later become Moaning Myrtle's bathroom, ensuring that those who knew the secret could still access the chamber. During the 19th century, Noctua Gaunt attempted to challenge the family's devotion to the dark arts and sought to uncover more about Salazar Slytherin's legacy. While at Hogwarts, she discovered the secret entrance to Slytherin's scriptorium. Her fate, however, was grim. She embarked on the scriptorium's convoluted magical puzzles alone and perished before the final door, which required the use of the Cruciatus Curse, a curse she had no one to wield it on, leaving her trapped by her own ambition. Decades later, it would be her nephew, Ominis Gaunt, who finally navigated the scriptorium during his 5th year at Hogwarts. Yet, unlike his ancestors, Ominis rejected the supremacist ideals of his lineage, deeply ashamed of the Gaunt name and the dark legacy it carried. By the early 20th century, the English Gaunts were shadows of their former glory. Their once mighty house had dwindled to a small, crumbling shack, filled with the scent of mildew and the echoes of past grandeur. Generations of inbreeding had warped the family line, leaving the Gaunts prone to violence, obsession, and instability. Magic, once a tool of pride and power, had become an extension of their torment. Marvolo Gaunt, heir to the family's name and its dark legacy, ruled the shack with a fearsome and cruel authority. His temper was volatile, frightening all who lived under his roof, and his abuse of his daughter, Merope, left her fragile and fearful, her magic stunted under the weight of constant terror. Others whispered that she might be a squib, though the truth was far darker. The house itself, the blood in her veins, had become a cage. Merope's brother, Morfin, was a different kind of nightmare. Fluent in Parseltongue more than English, he roamed the countryside with a venomous tongue and a fractured mind, terrorizing Muggles and leaving a trail of whispered fear. Amid this oppressive darkness, Merope's heart betrayed her bloodline. She fell in secret for Tom Riddle, a strikingly handsome and wealthy Muggle, the only child of Thomas and Mary Riddle. When her brother revealed the affair one fateful summer in 1925, Marvolo's fury ignited. He attacked Merope with all the force of his rage, which led to his arrest by a ministry official. He, along with his son Morfin, who had cursed Riddle in a jealous fit, were sent to Azkaban. With her tormentors removed, Merope vanished from the shack, leaving only a brief note revealing her marriage to Riddle, stepping into a world that would soon know the full, terrifying legacy of her blood.
I love him.
After barely a year of marriage, Merope Gaunt became pregnant and chose to release Tom Riddle from the enchantment that bound him. Tired of living a lie, she believed, or perhaps hoped, that love might have taken root on its own, or that he would remain for the sake of their unborn child. Instead, Riddle awoke into a nightmare. Convinced he had been bewitched, he fled without hesitation, returning to his family home and leaving Merope behind, alone with the truth she had feared all along. Impoverished, starving, and unaware of her true worth, Merope sold the locket of Salazar Slytherin to Borgin and Burke's for a pittance, trading one of the greatest relics of the wizarding world for a few weeks of survival. She gave birth beneath the freezing snow of January on the steps of a London orphanage. The birth cost her life. The child, born as Tom Marvolo Riddle, would become the figure the world would one day remember as the most powerful dark wizard in history, Voldemort. Marvolo Gaunt returned from his 6-month sentence in Azkaban only to find his lineage shattered. Whether from shock, grief, or the unbearable weight of betrayal, he did not live long after. Morfin Gaunt, released after 3 years of imprisonment, inherited what remained of the family: a name, a shack, and a legacy already rotting from within. Along with them, he inherited his father's ring, the last precious heirloom of the House of Gaunt. For 13 years, Morfin lived in isolation as the final male heir of his line. Neglect consumed both him and the home he refused to abandon, until man and dwelling became equally unrecognizable. When his nephew, then a brilliant student at Hogwarts, came seeking knowledge of his heritage, Morfin greeted him with scorn and contempt. He did not realize that Voldemort, even at that age, was never to be underestimated. The young wizard framed him for the murder of the Riddle family, a crime Voldemort himself had committed, implanting false memories that Morfin accepted without resistance. He confessed to a crime he did not commit and was sentenced to life in Azkaban. By the time the truth began to surface, his body was already failing. Morfin Gaunt died in prison, buried on the cold grounds of Azkaban before the Ministry could correct its mistake. Thus, the Gaunt ring passed into Voldemort's hands. Years later, he would also reclaim the relic lost by his mother, Slytherin's locket. Both would become Horcruxes. Both would be found and destroyed during the Second Wizarding War, sealing his final defeat. With Voldemort's death, the male line of the House of Gaunt came to an end. The name became extinct, fading from history like a bad dream at dawn. Gone, but never truly forgotten.
Of Normans, ambition, and change.
At the dawn of the 9th century, the world of men was reshaped by iron, fire, and sails that cut through the mist like blades. From the frozen shores of the north, the Vikings, fierce witches and wizards, warriors and skilled sailors, swept across the kingdoms of Europe, leaving behind them a trail of conquest, terror, and change. Their knowledge of magic was unlike anything considered traditional or canonical at the time. Norse magic drew its greatest power from ancient symbols, used to amplify and alter the very core of spells and curses. The runes. Yet few speak of how these events echoed within the hidden world of magic. In truth, where Muggle kings fell to northern raiders, so too did ancient wizarding strongholds. In time, a new people emerged, the Normans, born from the union of Norse blood and Frankish soil. At the time, one of the most powerful realms in the world. Hardened by centuries of battle and diplomacy, they became a force both revered and feared among Muggles and magical folk alike. And so, by the end of the 10th century, the Normans turned their gaze toward the fertile lands of England, just as their wizards sought to expand their dominion and seize the ancient magical secrets hidden within the British Isles. But what history forgets is that among their ranks, hidden behind banners and blades, traveled a wizard of extraordinary ambition, one who would forever alter not just the fate of England, but of the wizarding world itself. Armand of House Malfoy. a name which, according to Old French, can be translated as bad faith. A skilled and ambitious warrior wizard, as well as a cunning military strategist, little is known of how Armand first gained the favor of William, Duke of Normandy, later known to history as William the Conqueror.
Malfoy.
But by the time the English crown rested upon his brow in 1066, Malfoy's place at his side was already assured.
Welcome.
Unlike the knights and lords who pledged steel and blood to King William, Armand offered something far more valuable.
I bring you power.
Magic, and likely magic of the darkest kind. Whispers spoke of services rendered, acts cloaked in sorcery and shadow, unseen by the common eye, yet instrumental in cementing William's grip over the newly conquered realm.
Crown brings order.
Beyond the other pure-blood fools, too fat and too lazy to see past their own noses, Armand Malfoy knew he would claim his rightful place. In these new lands, he, like the entire Norman people, saw wealth and opportunity. In these lands, he envisioned a prosperous future for his dynasty, a dynasty of such prestige and power that it would be forever remembered and feared in the wizarding world. The name Malfoy was never to be forgotten at any cost.
For your loyalty.
In return for these secret deeds,
I bestow
the king rewarded the wizard with a vast and fertile estate in Wiltshire, torn from the hands of the vanquished. There, far from the prying eyes of the Muggle court, Armand Malfoy planted the roots of a legacy that would endure for centuries, one built upon ambition, cunning, and an unwavering belief in the superiority of wizard kind. Over the generations, Slytherin pride firmly established the Malfoy family as synonymous not only with wealth and wizarding prowess, but with an unshakable belief in their own superiority. They rose swiftly, weaving themselves into the very fabric of power, and not merely in the hidden halls of magic. In those centuries, the Malfoys moved with ease through the courts and salons of Muggle nobility, wearing fine silks and false smiles. To the unsuspecting eyes of England's elite, they were patrons, scholars, and landed gentry. But in truth, every handshake, every whispered conversation, every glass raised in toast was another calculated step. The Malfoys knew that real power was not won with spells alone, but through influence, wealth, and the slow, patient strangling of rivals with silken cords. Whispers still linger in the dusty corners of history that the first Lucius Malfoy, ambitious beyond measure, dared to set his sights upon no less a prize than the Virgin Queen herself, Elizabeth I.
What is your intent?
Though later generations of the family would hotly deny such scandalous claims, wizarding historians have not been so easily convinced. Some allege that Elizabeth's famed refusal to marry was not a choice of virtue or strategy, but the lingering effect of a powerful jinx woven by a slighted Malfoy hand. A wound to pride, perhaps, but a testament to the dynasty's gift
Wear your crown alone,
for ambition without shame.
Majesty.
As the decades marched onward, the family's estate in Wiltshire grew vast and impenetrable, swallowing up the lands of neighboring Muggle families like a serpent coiling around its prey. Gold and silver flowed into Malfoy coffers, not conjured, but seized through clever dealings and an unerring instinct for exploiting the weaknesses of those without magic to shield them. It was during this golden ascent that a new venture took root.
Welcome.
What began as a modest private collection of potions and fine brews, hoarded by a particularly enterprising ancestor, soon evolved into a thriving business. Among their many ventures, the Malfoy Apothecary rose to prominence, dealing in rare elixirs and notably a superior red wine. A name that, with typical Malfoy subtlety, hinted at the precious purity
Today,
they held so dear.
we celebrate.
Their fortune became not merely a measure of their success, but a fortress, a gleaming testament to their belief that blood, wealth, and power were the only currencies that truly mattered. But after years of tensions and disputes, the year of change finally arrived in the wizarding world. It was 1692, and the International Statute of Wizarding Secrecy had been definitively approved as a strict mandate. From that moment on, no Muggle was ever to come into contact with, or even learn of, the existence of the wizarding world. all they would remember in time would simply fade away over the centuries, blending into legends, unsolved mysteries, and children's fairy tales. Yet no empire stands unchanged by the tides of history. When the Ministry of Magic decreed the creation of a boundary that would forever and irrevocably divide the two worlds, the Malfoys fought fiercely against it.
Nonsense.
To sever their carefully cultivated ties to Muggle high society was, to them, a sacrilege,
My lady.
a loss of influence they were unwilling to accept.
Shall we?
But survival,
Yes,
as ever,
gladly.
demanded adaptability.
My lord.
When it became clear that opposition was futile, the House of Malfoy pivoted with characteristic ruthlessness, reinventing themselves as champions of wizarding purity.
Easy now.
They erased the past with the ease of a master spellcaster, wiping clean a slate.
Be gone.
No longer the charming lords and ladies who had once dined at the tables of Muggle kings and queens.
Filthy muggle.
No, the Malfoys now presented themselves as paragons of untouched bloodlines, loudly denying that they had ever lowered themselves to such company. Muggles and their filthy mudblood offspring would become the scapegoats, the necessary enemy. The lamb they had so carefully nurtured over the centuries was finally ready for the slaughter. With the world of Muggles firmly walled off and wizard kind drawing tighter behind its veil of secrecy, the Malfoys did what they had always done best: adapt and thrive. No longer able to exert influence through the courts of mortal kings, they turned their gaze inward, setting their sights upon the halls of magical governance. The newly established British Ministry of Magic became their hunting ground. Though no Malfoy ever stooped to openly campaign for the title of minister, a position as ostentatious as it was burdensome, their gold flowed like a river beneath the surface of politics. Elections were quietly financed, opponents discreetly hexed, and policies bent to favor those who understood which side their bread was buttered on. Real power, after all, did not wear a public face. It moved unseen, whispered in ears, and weighed heavy in unseen ledgers. Among the darker and more curious tales of the time, the name of Nicholas Malfoy looms large.
I hate trouble.
A landowner during the 14th century, Nicholas was said to have rid himself of troublesome Muggle tenants by orchestrating deaths blamed on the Black Death itself. No proof ever reached the Wizards' Council, of course. Yet, despite the passing of centuries, it seems that no amount of gold was ever quite enough to erase such rumors entirely. In the twilight years of the 18th century, the then head of the family, Septimus Malfoy, rose to prominence.
Minister?
His influence was so suffocating that many believed the Minister for Magic at the time,
Septimus?
Unctuous Osbert,
Forgive me.
to be little more than his mouthpiece, a puppet
Portion.
whose loyalties were bought,
Osbert.
not earned.
It suits you.
Even in more modern times, the Malfoy legacy of subtle corruption persisted. Abraxas Malfoy, an elegant and ruthless figure, was widely suspected of orchestrating the downfall of the first Muggle-born Minister for Magic, Nobby Leach, whose appointment in 1962 had prompted the resignation of many of the Wiesengarmot's elder members in protest. A few years later, Leach resigned under mysterious circumstances. As always, no guilt was proven. As always, the prestigious House of Malfoy remained untouchable. And so, in the late 19th century, the Malfoy family cemented their status as one of the most powerful and influential bloodlines in the wizarding world, securing a place among the so-called Sacred 28, the last remaining pure blood families recognized by the ministry. However, their ideology and fierce anti-Muggle stance set them apart from the more ancient, powerful, and fanatical houses of the wizarding world, such as the Blacks, the Lestranges, and the Gaunts, who were driven by a purist zeal that bordered on madness, willing to sacrifice everything for the preservation of a perfect bloodline, even at the cost of their own genetic health. The Malfoys, however, knew that true superiority was not inbred. It was forged through wealth and power. Their pragmatic stance on marriage, while often criticized by purists, did not stop them from receiving the respect and admiration of such families. After all, their riches and influence were far too tempting for even the most ideologically rigid to ignore. The 20th century would test the House of Malfoy as no war before it ever had. When the Second Wizarding War reached its final hours, survival outweighed loyalty. Narcissa Malfoy, born black, lied to Voldemort himself, sealing his fate, while neither she nor Lucius raised a wand during the Battle of Hogwarts. It was enough to spare the family Azkaban, but not disgrace. Their allegiance to the Dark Lord was laid bare, their name stripped of its former prestige. The Malfoys endured, wealthy as ever, yet quietly exiled from respect, ignored in a world they once ruled. In the years that followed, Draco Malfoy chose a different path. He married Astoria Greengrass against the will of his parents. Shaped by war and suffering, Astoria rejected the old dogmas of supremacy, and Draco followed her lead. Together, they had a son, Scorpius, raised according to those values, taught tolerance, respect, and kindness in a household long defined by pride and fear. Like his parents before him, Scorpius attended Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry, where he was ultimately sorted into Slytherin House. After Astoria's death, they remained at Malfoy Manor, surrounded by gold and silence. Draco kept the family's dark artifacts sealed behind glass, studied alchemy, and searched, perhaps, for meaning beyond inheritance. The Malfoys remained powerful, untouched by poverty, yet forever changed.
Of heart, bravery, and family.
Just beyond the quiet village of Ottery St. Catchpole, where wizards have lived discreetly beside their muggle neighbors since the Statute of Secrecy, stands a house unlike any other. Crooked, patched, and clearly held together by magic, the borough is the warm heart of one of Britain's most beloved wizarding families, the Weasleys. The Weasley name is steeped in magical tradition, a pure blood lineage with roots reaching deep into the soil of wizarding history. They are, by blood at least, among the old wizarding families. Yet, their place within the wizarding world has long been a curious contradiction. Included in the so-called Sacred 28, a registry compiled in the early 20th century to celebrate blood purity, the Weasleys were once regarded as aristocracy of sorts. And yet, unlike many of their counterparts, they became known not for wealth, power, or political ambition, but for something far more radical: kindness, conviction, and a defiant lack of prejudice. In a society where lineage was everything, the Weasleys dared to be different. Even as far back as the dark centuries of the Middle Ages, a time when hatred and resentment were the order of the day. Sympathetic to Muggleborns, welcoming to Muggles themselves, and openly critical of the darker ideologies that plagued their world, they drew the disdain of many so-called pure-blood elites. To those obsessed with status and bloodline, the Weasleys were, and are, something of a paradox. Pure of blood, but not of heart, at least by their narrow standards. Their surname, thought to be derived from the same root as weasel, has not helped their standing among the more superstitious corners of the magical world. In British Muggle folklore, the weasel is often considered an ill omen, cunning, unlucky, even cursed. Add to that a full head of flame-red hair, long believed to carry its own dark superstitions even among witches and wizards, and you begin to understand why some have looked down their noses at the Weasleys since ancient times. Long before the most famous generation of Weasleys took their first steps into the world, another name quietly earned its place in the family's storied history. Matilda Weasley, a sharp and remarkably gifted witch of the late 19th century, distinguished herself at Hogwarts for her skill in transfiguration and her uncanny ability to unravel even the most intricate of enchantments. Revered by teachers and peers alike, she would later serve the British Ministry of Magic as a curse breaker, traversing the globe to uncover forgotten relics and ancient hexes. Her exploits, though often overshadowed by those of later generations, left a quiet but enduring mark upon the family lore. By 1891, she had risen to the position of deputy headmistress at Hogwarts, serving under Phineas Nigellus Black. That year, her composure would be tested like never before, as the castle came under siege from within. A violent uprising led by the goblin Ranrock, who sought to unearth and wield Hogwarts' ancient, hidden magic. Matilda stood steadfast alongside her fellow professors, defending the school stone by stone. The cost was high. The loss of Professor Fig, a colleague and friend, cast a long shadow over the Great Hall. And yet, even in the wake of such sorrow, life at Hogwarts carried on, as it always has. By the following year, Matilda would meet the boy who would become her most brilliant pupil, a quietly intense young wizard named Albus Dumbledore. Though Matilda's deeds earned quiet admiration, the Weasleys' path through wizarding society would remain complex and often scrutinized, as the family's character, compassionate and principled, frequently set them at odds with the rigid traditions of their pure-blood peers. To families like the Malfoys or the Blacks, staunch defenders of ancestral lineage, the Weasleys were seen as traitors, pure by birth, yet tainted by sympathy. So deeply did some feel this perceived disgrace when Cedrella Black, daughter of that proud and ancient house, married Septimus Weasley. Second of three sisters, sorted into Slytherin House, but holding views diametrically opposed to those of her family, Cedrella chose love above all else. Her fate mirrors that of another young black woman from the following generation, Andromeda. Both were struck from the family tree altogether, their names scorched from the tapestry as though they had never existed. Yet from Cedrella and Septimus's love was born little Arthur, a red-haired boy, as clumsy as he was brimming with curiosity for the world. A man who would later be remembered by many as the father of the most brilliant generation of Weasleys the wizarding world has ever known. Arthur arrived at Hogwarts in the autumn of 1961, wide-eyed and eager, and was sorted, unsurprisingly for a Weasley, into Gryffindor House. There was nothing particularly grand or flashy about Arthur. He was not the loudest voice in the room nor the most daring on a broomstick, but there was something quietly determined in the way he carried himself. In his third year, in a decision that raised more than a few eyebrows among his peers, Arthur chose to take Muggle studies. It wasn't a popular choice, not at the time, but for Arthur, it was simple fascination. There was something enchanting about the way Muggles navigated a world entirely without magic, crafting their lives with ingenuity and perseverance. To Arthur, this was a kind of magic in itself, one worth understanding. It was during these formative school years that Arthur, almost always with his nose buried in books and inventions, began to spend time with a fellow Gryffindor who would, in time, come to define the rest of his life, Molly Prewett. Practically his opposite in many ways, she was spirited, sharp-witted, and carried a rebellious air about her. With her auburn hair and quick temper, she could quiet a room with a glance, and often did. As one might expect from a Prewett, herself a proud member of the Sacred 28, Molly had grown up in a lively wizarding household with two brothers, Fabian and Gideon. These young wizards were brilliant, but equally reckless and trouble-prone, sharing with their sister an inexhaustible joy, optimism, and a penchant for mischief. At first, Molly enjoyed teasing Arthur for his eccentric ways, but little by little, she found herself admiring the uniqueness of the boy, so many called odd. What began as fleeting glances and shared jokes soon blossomed into long evenings spent nestled in armchairs, whispering dreams about the world beyond the castle walls. And it could be said that the young Miss Prewett had a profound influence on that shy, bookish boy, helping him, little by little, to reveal the true Gryffindor spirit that had always lived quietly within him.
"And the fat lady?"
said Bill.
"She was here in my time,"
said Mrs. Weasley.
"She gave me such a telling off one night when I got back to the dormitory at 4 in the morning.
"What were you doing out of your dormitory at 4 in the morning?"
said Bill, surveying his mother with amazement. Mrs. Weasley grinned, her eyes twinkling. Not long after graduating from Hogwarts, Arthur and Molly married, a quiet, heartfelt union that stood in contrast to the darkening skies gathering over the wizarding world. The young couple moved into the Burrow, the ramshackle yet deeply charming Weasley family home, nestled on the outskirts of Ottery St. Catchpole. crooked walls and misbehaving staircases gave the house a character all of its own. But it was Molly's warmth and Arthur's gentle humor that truly made it a home. It looked as though it had once been a large stone pig pen, but extra rooms had been added here and there until it was several stories high and so crooked it looked as though it were held up by magic, which, Harry reminded himself, it probably was. 4 or 5 chimneys were perched on top of the red roof. A lopsided sign stuck in the ground near the entrance read, "The Burrow." Around the front door lay a jumble of rubber boots and a very rusty cauldron. Several fat brown chickens were pecking their way around the yard. Their first child, William, Bill as he came to be known, was born on the 29th of November, 1970. Adventurous from a young age, with a quiet confidence and a taste for the unknown, he was the beginning of what would become one of the most beloved and boisterous wizarding families in Britain. Charlie arrived not long after, full of energy and an early fascination with magical creatures that never quite left him. Then came the meticulous and bright-eyed Percy, followed by the twins, Fred and George, who seemed to bring with them a permanent air of mischief and mayhem, even in infancy. After 5 sons, Molly, ever the determined woman, longed for a daughter. Yet when she tried again, she was gifted another boy, Ronald, a kind-hearted and quietly brave child, often overshadowed by the chaos of his older brothers, but destined to find strength in his own way. At last, she welcomed Ginevra, her long-awaited daughter, fiery, fearless, and with a natural talent for Quidditch that would rival any of her brothers. It was a time of joy and chaos in equal measure within the walls of the Burrow, but outside, the world was changing. Lord Voldemort's rise to power plunged wizarding Britain into a time of fear and uncertainty, a period that would later be remembered as the First Wizarding War. Though Arthur was employed at the Ministry, and Molly herself was never officially listed among the members of the Order of the Phoenix, a clandestine group founded by Albus Dumbledore to oppose the Death Eaters and the Dark Lord's rising forces. It was no mark against her courage. With a house full of small children and a husband often working late hours, her battleground was the home, where lullabies meant more than any shielding charm. Molly fought to preserve something just as vital, a sense of safety, of normalcy, of love within the storm. During the war, many witches and wizards sacrificed all they had for the cause of the Order of the Phoenix, placing their own lives and those of their loved ones in constant peril day after day. And among them were, of course, her 2 beloved brothers. Fabian was as powerful as he was impulsive and defiant. Gideon, calm and composed, a brilliant strategist and sharp-minded planner. Their actions, often unpredictable and carried out without the full approval of the Order, became a relentless thorn in the Dark Lord's side. And yet, it was their boldness that ultimately led them to a tragic fate. They fell in a Death Eater ambush, too violent and savage to be spoken of in full, even today. What truly matters, however, is the memory of their names and the ideals for which they fought. It is said that their sister honored her brothers by naming her twin sons with the same initials. F for Fabian, G for Gideon, Fred and George. 2 more mischief makers, blessed with extraordinary talent. With the fall of the Dark Lord and the miracle that surrounded young Harry Potter, the war, despite all its grief, its losses, and the silence it left behind, had finally come to an end. The Weasleys, resilient as ever, rolled up their sleeves and began to rebuild. And at the head of this new chapter stood their eldest, Bill. From the very start, Bill Weasley showed himself to be a remarkable young wizard. Sorted, naturally, into Gryffindor, he distinguished himself not just through bravery, but through an uncommon intellect and quiet determination. In his 3rd year, to the astonishment of many, he managed to take all 5 elective subjects: Muggle studies, care of magical creatures, divination, arithmancy, and study of ancient runes. Quite how he juggled such a punishing schedule remains a mystery, though some whispered that Professor Dumbledore may have permitted him the use of a time-turner. During his years at Hogwarts, Bill also became entangled in the shadows of the school's past, specifically the dark and dangerous mystery of the cursed vaults. said to be 5 ancient chambers hidden deep within the castle, each one protected by a unique and formidable curse. The vaults were the stuff of rumor and fear. Some claimed they held treasures beyond imagination: gold, lost prophecies, ancient artifacts of unspeakable power, while others believed they were prisons for magic, too dangerous to be known. Through it all, Bill's quiet excellence endured. He was named prefect in his 5th year and head boy by his 7th. And before leaving Hogwarts, he was awarded the prestigious Medal for Magical Merit, an honor that made it all the easier for him to secure a position with Gringotts Wizarding Bank, long coveted by the young Weasley. There, he joined the ranks of the Cursebreakers, a daring profession that combined magical expertise with the spirit of an adventurer. Operating more as treasure-hunting archaeologists than traditional bankers, Gringotts' Cursebreakers roamed the globe in search of ancient tombs, hidden vaults, and long-lost hoards, many of them sealed behind deadly enchantments, dark magic, or creatures long forgotten by time. It was dangerous work, to be sure, but for Bill, it was a calling. Part scholar, part explorer, and every bit the Gryffindor his family had always known him to be.
Dad'll go crazy.
Just 2 years younger than Bill, Charlie Weasley was cut from a rather different cloth, but no less remarkable for it. From an early age, the boy exhibited an intense fascination with magical creatures, dragons most of all. Family legend recalls a young Charlie attempting, with all the earnestness of childhood, to transform the family pets into dragons. Something tells me that Errol the Owl and Scabbers the Rat didn't quite enjoy that part. He began at Hogwarts on the 1st of September, 1984, and, like his siblings before and after, was sorted into Gryffindor. It didn't take long for Charlie to make his mark. By the end of his 2nd year, he had earned a place as Seeker on the Gryffindor Quidditch team, and by his 5th year, he was both team captain and a school prefect. With his natural leadership and uncanny affinity for flight, many believed Charlie could have gone on to play Quidditch professionally. Some even claimed he had the talent to join the national side. But glory on the pitch was never his ambition. In those years, like Bill, Charlie too found himself drawn into the shadows of one of Hogwarts' most dangerous secrets, the Cursed Vaults. Together with a group of fellow students, including his sharp-witted and spirited friend Nymphadora Tonks, he spent much of his school years trying to break the ancient curses that had haunted the castle for generations. They were difficult years, dark and often perilous, yet in the end, tranquility once more embraced the school. After leaving Hogwarts, he chose a path truer to his heart than any Quidditch Cup could offer. He traveled east to the dragon reserves of Romania. There, he would go on to become one of the finest dragon handlers of his generation, fearless, patient, and deeply respected among his peers. In 1992, Charlie received a rather peculiar letter from his youngest brother, Ron, requesting help with a dragon-related dilemma. As it turned out, Rubeus Hagrid, the Hogwarts gamekeeper and a longtime friend of Charlie's, had come into possession of a Norwegian ridgeback, illegally, and from a rather suspicious character later revealed to be none other than Professor Quirrell, acting under the influence of the Dark Lord himself. Recognizing the danger, not only to Hagrid, but to the creature as well, Charlie arranged for a discreet midnight extraction. The baby dragon, named Norbert, was quietly transported to the sanctuary in Romania, far from the scheming shadows that had begun to creep once again through the wizarding world. As for the rest, well, that tale has long since been told. Nearly a decade younger than Charlie, Percy Ignatius Weasley arrived in a very different chapter of the family's story. With the war over and the wizarding world cautiously rebuilding itself, Percy entered life under far more stable skies, though no less eager to make his own mark upon them. From his earliest years, Percy was the embodiment of order and ambition, meticulous, rule-abiding, and hopelessly enamored with notions of prestige and success. He viewed the world not through flights of fancy or dreams of dragons, but through the sharp lens of structure and protocol. While Bill had been bold and Charlie wild-hearted, Percy was determined to rise. He began at Hogwarts on the 1st of September, 1987, and, unsurprisingly, was sorted into Gryffindor, though more for his drive and conviction than any fondness for breaking rules. He shared a dormitory with the steadfast Oliver Wood, and brought with him the family rat, Scabbers. blissfully unaware that the pet he'd inherited was, in truth, the animagus and fugitive Peter Pettigrew. Academically gifted and methodical, Percy quickly distinguished himself among his peers. He was made prefect in his 5th year, much to the pride of his parents, who rewarded him with brand new robes and a screech owl he named Hermes. Not long after, Percy began quietly dating Penelope Clearwater, a fellow prefect from Ravenclaw, though he worked hard to keep the relationship secret from his siblings, for fear that Fred and George would turn his romantic ventures into a source of unrelenting torment. It was during this time that the Chamber of Secrets was opened, plunging the school into fear and suspicion. When Penelope, a Muggle-born, was later petrified by the monster within the chamber, Percy was shaken. Though he rarely wore his emotions, his quiet devastation was visible to anyone who knew where to look. That devastation reached its lowest point when, not long afterwards, his little first-year sister, Ginny, was taken by the heir of Slytherin.
She won't wait.
But the story of the Chamber of Secrets, fortunately, ended well. As the years passed, the prefect became head boy, and Percy graduated from Hogwarts with top marks in all his newts, already setting his sights on the corridors of power at the Ministry of Magic. Soon after, he was appointed to the Department of International Magical Cooperation under Bartemius Crouch Sr. There, his star continued to rise. However, following the tragic events of the Triwizard Tournament, the death of Crouch, the return of the Dark Lord, and the ensuing chaos, Percy found himself caught in the widening rift between the Ministry and those who sided with Dumbledore and Harry Potter. And here, Percy made his choice. He gained the trust of senior officials and, in time, was promoted to serve as personal assistant to the Minister for Magic himself, Cornelius Fudge. When he dismissed the Dark Lord's return as a fabrication, Percy did not hesitate to align himself with his superiors. He expected his family to be proud. Instead, he was met with disappointment and fury. A bitter confrontation with his father ended with Percy storming out of the burrow, accusing Arthur of lacking ambition and of holding the family back. That very night, he packed his things and left. He cut ties with all of them. His mother, heartbroken, came to London to plead with him. He shut the door in her face. And so, while the Order of the Phoenix quietly reassembled to face the gathering storm, Percy stood apart, alone in a modest flat in London, loyal to the Ministry and convinced he was doing the right thing. Fred and George Weasley were, quite simply, chaos incarnate, with ginger hair and matching grins. From the moment they learned to walk, and more critically to run, the burrow had not known a quiet day. Their bedroom was a battlefield of bangs, bursts, and bubbling concoctions. Explosions were not occasional, they were expected. Molly Weasley loved them, of course, but she also very nearly lost her mind raising them. Naturally, they were both sorted into Gryffindor, where they immediately made a name for themselves. By their 2nd year, they'd secured positions as beaters for the Gryffindor Quidditch team, wielding their clean sweep fives with frightening precision. Their style was described, with great accuracy, as like playing with 2 human bludgers. They were adored by their peers and treated like minor celebrities in their house. The twins' true moment of destiny, however, came when they snatched a tattered bit of magical parchment from Filch's office. The Marauder's map. It was love at first incantation. No one can truly say how the two managed to uncover its prodigious secrets. Since one needs the password, I solemnly swear that I am up to no good to activate it, and mischief managed to conceal it again. There are many theories on the matter, and perhaps the truth will never be known. Yet the most credited explanation is that the very magic infused within the map recognized in Fred and George the same spirit as its original creators, the Marauders. The same rebellious streak, the same courage, the same urge to bend the rules, and to remind everyone that, in the end, having a laugh is what truly matters. With that in hand, and their boundless imagination, Fred and George turned Hogwarts into their personal playground. Though they excelled in pranks, few acknowledged just how bright they truly were. Despite their antics, both boys received strong marks during their early Hogwarts years, but as their joke inventions grew more elaborate, their priorities shifted. They began testing their prototypes in secret. Canary creams, fainting fancies, nosebleed nougats, all in preparation for something far bigger than anyone guessed. Their network of friends was wide. Lee Jordan was practically a third twin, and the Gryffindor Quidditch team, Angelina Johnson, Alicia Spinett, Katie Bell, Oliver Wood, formed a loyal circle that knew them well. Even Hermione Granger, though often at odds with their ethics, eventually came to respect their ingenuity. In their final year at Hogwarts, things took a darker turn. With Dolores Umbridge as High Inquisitor and Dumbledore driven out, Hogwarts became a place of surveillance and fear. When Umbridge banned them from Quidditch, after an altercation with Draco Malfoy, they responded with fireworks, literal ones. Their pièce de résistance was legendary. During the Easter holidays, they calmly packed up, dropped out, and flew off into the sky after unleashing their Weasley's wildfire whiz-bangs in a dazzling display of defiance. It wasn't just rebellion, it was performance art. Their portable swamp was so elegantly conjured that Professor Flitwick preserved a section of it as a fine example of magical innovation. Initially, their dreams of opening a joke shop had been a sore point with their mother, who feared her boys were wasting their potential. But Weasley's Wizard Wheezes, 93 Diagon Alley, changed everything. The shop became one of the most popular locations in the wizarding world, its windows bursting with color, laughter, and magical mayhem. Their mail order business had become a juggernaut. They even spoke of buying Zonko's, the legendary Hogsmeade joke shop, after it closed down. But when war returned to the wizarding world, the laughter dimmed, but did not vanish. Fred and George joined the Order of the Phoenix, following in the footsteps of Bill and Charlie. Their humor remained, but sharpened with purpose. They were no longer simply tricksters. They were defenders of light, of joy, of rebellion. And in the darkest of times, they reminded all who knew them that sometimes laughter is the greatest form of resistance. Ronald Bilius Weasley was born on the 1st of March, 1980, into a world already trembling beneath the shadow of the Dark Lord. Growing up the youngest of 6 boisterous brothers was no small trial. Fred and George, in particular, found endless amusement in tormenting their little brother, turning his teddy bear into a spider, a cruel joke that planted the seeds of a lifelong arachnophobia, tricking him with enchanted sweets, and once, even attempting to bind him in an unbreakable vow, until Arthur's fury put an abrupt end to their mischief. To be a Weasley meant learning resilience. For Ron, it meant finding his voice amid the chaos. As a child, his constant companion was Scabbers, a lazy, rather shabby rat he had inherited from Percy. When, in September 1991, Ron boarded the Hogwarts Express for the first time, he did so with a mixture of excitement and dread. He feared that, after 5 elder brothers who had all excelled in their own ways, he would fail to live up to the Weasley name. Yet fate had other plans. In a chance meeting aboard that train, he sat down opposite a bespectacled boy with a lightning-shaped scar, Harry Potter. What began with a chocolate frog and a nervous laugh soon became a friendship that would change not only Ron's life, but the course of the entire wizarding world.
I'm the 6th in our family to go to Hogwarts. You could say I got a lot to live up to. Bill and Charlie have already left. Bill was head boy and Charlie was captain of Quidditch. Now Percy's a prefect. Fred and George mess around a lot, but they still get really good marks, and everyone thinks they're really funny. Everyone expects me to do as well as the others, but if I do, it's no big deal, because they did it first.
At Hogwarts, Ron was sorted, unsurprisingly, into Gryffindor. But his courage was not loud or ostentatious. Rather, it revealed itself in moments of quiet loyalty, when standing by his friends meant everything. Alongside Harry and Hermione Granger, at first dismissed by Ron as a nightmare, only to become one of his dearest companions, he embarked on adventure after adventure. The Philosopher's Stone, the Chamber of Secrets, the rescue of Sirius Black, the defense of Buckbeak. Wherever danger lay, Ron was there, often grumbling, often doubting himself, but never truly faltering when it mattered most. The revelation that his pet rat, Scabbers, was in truth Peter Pettigrew, a traitor long thought dead, and the very man who had betrayed Harry's parents to Voldemort, shook Ron to his core. That his childhood companion had been the architect of so much grief was a bitter wound, one that deepened his resolve never to stand idly by in the face of darkness.
I'm doing
By
it.
his 5th year, with Lord Voldemort returned and the Ministry in denial, Ron joined Dumbledore's Army, a secret student organization that defied tyranny within the very walls of Hogwarts. In the Battle of the Department of Mysteries, he fought with desperate courage, proving himself not only as Harry's steadfast friend, but as a fighter in his own right. In the dark days that followed, Ron's insecurities often clashed with his loyalty, yet time and again he found the strength to rise above them. Nowhere was this clearer than in the trio's final quest, the hunt for Horcruxes. When faced with the cursed locket of Salazar Slytherin, it was Ron, often the one who felt least, who proved greatest. Summoning the sword of Godric Gryffindor itself, he destroyed the foul artifact, overcoming both the enchantment's venomous whispers and his own deepest fears. If Harry was the chosen one, Ron was proof that heroism does not lie in destiny, but in choice. He was the boy forever overshadowed, yet he grew into the man who stood shoulder to shoulder with legends. Brave, flawed, loyal to a fault, Ronald Bilious Weasley became not only Harry Potter's truest friend, but one of the most quietly indispensable figures in the fall of the Dark Lord. Ginevra Molly Weasley, better known to all as simply Ginny, was born on the 11th of August, 1981, the last of Arthur and Molly's 7 children, and the first daughter born into the Weasley line for generations. After 6 sons, Molly's long-cherished wish for a daughter was finally fulfilled. Yet Ginny was never destined to live in anyone's shadow. From her earliest years, Ginny displayed a fiery independence that set her apart. With 6 older brothers absorbed in endless Quidditch matches, she was forbidden from joining in. But Ginny was not one to be deterred. At just 6 years old, she began sneaking into the family broom shed, secretly flying each of her brothers' brooms in turn. For years, no one suspected a thing, until Hermione Granger, with her usual sharpness, revealed the truth to Fred and George years later. Even before her own letter from Hogwarts arrived, Ginny longed for the castle's enchanted corridors. She claimed she had wanted to go since the day Bill first set foot in its halls, though, at the time, she was barely a year old. Exaggeration, perhaps, but the sentiment spoke volumes. Ginny was a Weasley through and through, bold and eager to carve her place in the world. She was only 10 when she stood on platform 9 3/4 beside her mother, watching her brothers board the train in September 1991. It was there she first caught sight of Harry Potter. Too young to join him, yet utterly captivated, she pleaded with Molly to let her board the train. Her mother refused, but the impression had been made, and Ginny's childhood admiration soon blossomed into something deeper. When Ginny arrived at Hogwarts the following year, she was sorted into Gryffindor, like all the Weasleys before her. Bright, spirited, and determined, she should have been stepping into a new life, filled with excitement and promise. Instead, she fell prey to one of the darkest artifacts in wizarding history, Tom Riddle's diary. To Ginny, the diary seemed a confidant, a friend. She poured into it her heart's secret fears, the sting of her brother's teasing, the embarrassment of second-hand robes and books, the hopelessness of her feelings for Harry Potter. Yet each word she wrote fed the shadow within the pages. By Halloween, the memory of Tom Riddle had grown strong enough to possess her, forcing open the Chamber of Secrets and unleashing the basilisk upon Hogwarts. Slowly, Ginny's life force was drained, until she lay unconscious in the chamber, her very soul slipping away. It was Harry who saved her, destroying the diary with a basilisk fang and restoring Ginny's vitality. Though shaken and traumatized, she returned to school with quiet resilience, her strength of spirit soon reasserting itself. If anything, the ordeal forged her courage into steel. As the years passed, Ginny grew into a formidable witch, bright in her studies, sharp of tongue, and possessed of a wit that rivaled even Fred and George's. On the Quidditch pitch, she proved herself a natural. By her 4th year, she had earned a place as chaser for the Gryffindor team, and when circumstances demanded it, she flew as seeker in Harry's place. Though she modestly admitted he was better, her skill and daring quickly silenced any doubters. Like her brothers before her, Ginny stood firm against tyranny. She joined Dumbledore's army in her 4th year, dueling bravely beneath the watchful eyes of Dolores Umbridge's regime. In the final year, As the Death Eaters tightened their grip on Hogwarts, she became one of the school's most defiant rebels, leading resistance within the castle walls, even when Harry, Ron, and Hermione were absent. And when the Battle of Hogwarts erupted, Ginny was there. She fought not as the youngest Weasley, nor as Harry Potter's companion, but as her own person, fierce, unflinching, and courageous to the last. By the war's end, Ginny had become more than the fiery little sister who once trailed behind her brothers. She was a warrior in her own right, one of the brightest witches of her generation, and a living embodiment of the courage that had defined her family for centuries. In the years that followed the fall of Voldemort, the Weasley family endured both grief and renewal, their story a mirror of the wizarding world's slow return to peace. Bill Weasley, once cursed and scarred by Fenrir Greyback during the war, did not allow his injuries to overshadow his life. He had fallen in love with Fleur Delacour, the Beauxbaton champion whose courage and loyalty had proven themselves long before the battle was won. Despite their wedding being marred by Death Eaters' intrusion in 1997, their bond remained unshaken. After the war, they settled at Shell Cottage, a quiet refuge on the windswept coast, where they built a family together. Their children, Victoire, Dominique, and Louis Weasley, would grow up under the sound of the sea in a home touched by both French elegance and Weasley warmth. Charlie Weasley, ever faithful to dragons and the untamed wild, never sought a marriage or children of his own. During the war, he had worked from Romania, rallying foreign allies to the Order's cause. After peace returned, he simply continued his life's passion, the study of dragons, content to be the beloved uncle to a host of Weasley nieces and nephews. Percy Weasley faced one of the hardest journeys of reconciliation. Estranged from his family during Voldemort's rise, his absence at Bill and Fleur's wedding had broken his mother's heart. Yet when the final hour came, Percy returned to Hogwarts and stood beside his siblings. He begged their forgiveness, and though grief would soon strike them all, that reunion stood as a healing moment. After the war, Percy dedicated himself anew to the Ministry of Magic. Under the leadership of Kingsley Shacklebolt, he rose to become head of the Department of Magical Transportation, finding redemption in service and restoring honor to his name. The tale of Fred and George Weasley remains the family's deepest wound. Both had fought bravely in the skies above Privet Drive, and later at the Battle of Hogwarts, where they stood shoulder to shoulder defending the castle's secret passages. It was there, amidst the thunder of curses and collapsing stone, that Fred Weasley was killed in a sudden explosion. His laughter, so often the heartbeat of the family, was silenced in an instant. George, though he carried on, was never the same. In time, he married Angelina Johnson, and together they raised 2 children, Fred, named in honor of his fallen twin, and Roxanne. George kept alive the legacy he and Fred had built, running Weasley's Wizard Wheezes in Diagon Alley, a place where mischief and joy endured, even in the shadow of loss. Ron Weasley did not return to Hogwarts to complete a 7th year. Instead, he stepped directly into the rebuilding of their shattered world. Alongside Harry Potter, he joined the Auror Office, helping to track down and bring justice to those who had fled or hidden their allegiance to Voldemort. 2 years later, he chose a different path, joining George at the joke shop, ensuring that laughter remained part of their family's legacy. Ron later married Hermione Granger, his companion through war and friendship alike, and together they had 2 children, Rose and Hugo. To Ron, being immortalized on a chocolate frog card was his finest hour, though his truest pride lay in family and the future they had built. Ginny Weasley, the youngest of the clan, found her own light in the aftermath. Rekindling her love with Harry Potter, she went on to play as a chaser for the Holyhead Harpies, living the dream of her Hogwarts years. She and Harry later married, raising 3 children, James Sirius, Albus Severus, and Lily Luna, and in time, Ginny took her place as senior Quidditch correspondent for the Daily Prophet. Fierce, bold, and unyielding, she remained every bit the fiery heart of the Weasley family. Through joy and heartbreak, through the loss of Fred, and the births of new generations, the Weasleys endured. Their red-haired line, once mocked by some as poor and numerous, had proven to be among the bravest in wizarding history. In every battle, every sacrifice, and every new beginning, the Weasleys embodied what was strongest in the wizarding world: love, loyalty, and the courage to face the dark and still laugh.
Of tradition, doom, and tragedy.
Long before ministry decrees and wizarding statutes, when Britain was a tangle of fiefdoms and forgotten woods, a name began to whisper through the trees, half in reverence, half in fear. Black. Their precise origins remain contested. Some scholars trace them to medieval France, alongside families like the Malfoys and Lestranges, settling in Britain after the Norman conquest. A record in the Bibliothèque Magique de Paris notes a branch, the Noir, expelled from the rolls in 1234 after hosting a lavish banquet to celebrate their blood purity, inviting every pure blood family in the realm. Yet the feast concealed a cruel curse. Any guest whose blood was deemed impure would lose the right to speak forever. The curse sparked outrage, shattering the delicate balance within the French magical nobility, then carefully maintained between pure bloods and those of non-magical descent, alongside the sway of the non-magical aristocracy. According to this theory, the Noirs were swiftly condemned for their ruthless use of magic, their name forever stained, forcing the family into exile. The Blacks, however, dismiss any foreign ancestry, claiming a bloodline as British as Hogwarts itself. By the late Middle Ages, the family had forged a distinct identity. While others, like the Malfoys, sought favor in Muggle courts, the Blacks turned inward, rooted in older, darker ideals. They drew from Irish bloodlines, from Salazar Slytherin, and from the doctrines of the Gaunts. To them, Muggles were not simply lesser, they were corrosive. They shunned diplomacy, resisted integration, and held tradition above all. Their purism, never codified, yet deeply embedded, governed marriage, inheritance, and belief. Which brings us to Grimmauld Place. The origins of the London residents remain obscured by enchantments and misdirection, yet early 18th century maps speak of an estate hidden in what is now Islington. Built in secret, perhaps, cloaked from both Muggles and ministry. Following the Statute of Secrecy in 1689, most wizarding families retreated to rural enclaves. The Blacks did not. Out of pride or defiance, they stayed. And so, over time, Muggle London rose around them. For centuries, Britain's most purest wizarding family found themselves, ironically, at the heart of a Muggle borough. Some called it poetic, others tragic. But the Blacks, if they ever resented it, kept their silence. Across the centuries, the Black family produced countless notable figures: ministers, duelists, potion masters, and others whose names are better left unspoken. Yet few were as enigmatic or as unsettling as Apollonia Black. A Slytherin, attended Hogwarts towards the late 18th century. In those years, Richard Jackdaw, a reckless and infatuated student, sought to win her favor with a peculiar gift: pages torn from a book stolen from the mischievous Peeves the Poltergeist. Yet Apollonia found neither the gift nor the giver worthy, dismissing his courtship with cold indifference. When Jackdaw met a grim fate, decapitated under mysterious circumstances, Apollonia's testimony condemned Anne Thisbe, Jackdaw's secret lover and a Muggle-born witch. Motivated perhaps by jealousy or bitter disdain for Anne's heritage, Apollonia leveraged the Black family's influence at the Ministry of Magic to seal Anne's fate. She was sent to Azkaban, where she remained imprisoned until 1890, an injustice still remembered today. However, if any Black embodied the family's pride and prejudice, it was Phineas Nigellus, a sharp-tongued Slytherin from the late 1850s. He rose to become Hogwarts headmaster, though few liked him. Known more for his ambition and disdain for authority than kindness, Phineas was infamous for cancelling Quidditch and ignoring bullying. He cared little for students, more for status and legacy. When dark times came in 1891, as the Goblin uprising led by the Dark Ranrock loomed, he turned a deaf ear, avoiding getting his hands dirty with troubles beyond his concern. Yet few remember that the following year, it was under his headship that a young Albus Dumbledore first set foot in the place that would one day become his home. Even in death, Phineas Nigellus Black's portrait remains, a sharp-tongued presence, offering blunt counsel both at Hogwarts, among the portraits of his successors, and within the ancestral Black family home. Born into a lineage steeped in rigid traditions and dark prejudices, one figure dared to break the mold. Rejecting his family's fading legacy, he faced the shadows, within and beyond, with unwavering resolve. Championing freedom over conformity, he risked all to protect those he loved and forge a new path. This is the story of Sirius Black III, the last rebellious heir. As you will have gathered by now, few names carry such cold weight as the House of Black. An ancient dynasty, their bloodline claimed unbroken since the Middle Ages. Pure, powerful, untouchable. To the Blacks, purity wasn't just tradition. It was law. A legacy carved deep into their bones, whispered with each new birth. Toujours pur, always pure. Among pure blood families, they were royalty, proud and unyielding. Untainted by Muggle blood, they stood above all others. But behind the grandeur of their manor walls, behind the silken tapestries and formal grace, lay a darker truth. By the 20th century, the Blacks, like many noble lines, had learned to rewrite their own history, erasing Muggleborns, squibs, and anyone who dared dilute their blood. Names vanished, faces were forgotten. Blood was cleansed from the family tree with ruthless precision. Their obsession with purity twisted love and reason. Cousins married cousins, binding blood like a sacred flame, one that could never be diluted, no matter the cost. Orion and Walburga Black were no exception, bound not by passion, but by pedigree, a union as cold and precise as the creed they upheld. Orion Black was born in 1929, the only son of Arcturus Black and Melania Macmillan, heir to a long and venerable bloodline. His childhood was steeped in the silent pride of old money and older traditions, raised beneath the stern portraits of ancestors whose eyes still judged from beyond the grave. At Hogwarts, he was sorted, as expected, into Slytherin House, the cradle of ambition and legacy. There, he honed not only his magic, but the quiet arrogance instilled in him since birth, the belief that the world belonged to those of the right blood, and that the old ways had been forgotten by too many too quickly. In his youth, Orion, like many of his relatives, quietly supported the ideology of Gellert Grindelwald, whose meteoric rise during the 1930s ignited hope among purist families across Europe. Though the House of Black never pledged allegiance, many regarded his crusade with reverent fascination, believing he might be the visionary the wizarding world needed, someone capable of restoring order and reaffirming the cosmic hierarchy between Muggles and wizards. But in 1945, Grindelwald fell, and with the end of the global wizarding war, the dream of restoring the magical world to its former glory crumbled, scattered into the hush of the wind, a hush that had not yet spoken its final word. It was around this time that Walburga Black, born 4 years before Orion, emerged as his destined match. A devout traditionalist from her youth, she was the daughter of Pollux Black and Irma Crabbe, and a proud descendant of a line that viewed itself as the pinnacle of wizarding civilization. Like her brothers, Cygnus and Alphard, she was sorted into Slytherin, where she thrived in an atmosphere of superiority and tradition. But unlike many of her peers, still haunted by Grindelwald's legacy and growing more open to tolerance, Walburga remained unshaken. To her, the preservation of blood purity was not opinion. It was sacred. She had always known her future. Walburga did not dream of romance or rebellion. She dreamt of preservation, of continuing the Black name, intact and eternal. She waited patiently for Orion to complete his education, their engagement understood, if never announced. Their marriage, sometime in the 1950s, was less a union of souls than a ritualistic binding of bloodlines, an act of duty cloaked in the language of tradition. Together, they assumed their rightful place as patron and matron of the noble and most ancient House of Black. Their residence, number 12 Grimmauld Place, stood not merely as a home, but as a monument, austere, imposing, saturated in enchantments and legacy. Hidden within an ordinary street in Islington, the house remained concealed from unworthy eyes, protected by spells of immense power. Within those grand yet stifling walls, the next chapter of the Black lineage began, beneath stars that had guided their family for generations. For the House of Black did not name its children lightly. Across centuries, its sons and daughters had borne the names of stars and constellations, celestial bodies thought to reflect the purity and permanence of their bloodline. Each name was both symbol and prophecy, binding the child not only to the heavens, but to the heavy weight of legacy. And so, on the 3rd of November 1959, their firstborn was named Sirius, after the brightest star in the night sky. From the moment he was born, Sirius Black was destined to be the heir of his house. Before he could even read, lessons on blood purity and magical supremacy filled his days. Under the stern gaze of his mother, Walburga, and the icy silence of his father, Orion, Sirius was introduced not just to the magic they prized, but to its darkest corners. Dark magic wasn't feared in the Black household. It was studied, dissected, mastered. To them, true power meant knowing every shadow the ministry warned against. Only the weak feared power. Only the blind obeyed. But Sirius carried a storm in his bones, something wild that didn't belong in the polished parlor or the family tapestry. As a child, he slipped past wards and Creature, the surly house elf, to vanish into the streets of Muggle London. Not out of rebellion yet, but curiosity. The rattle of buses, the hum of traffic, the neon lights, the strange magic of cinema. It was loud, messy, alive. Unlike the stillness of Grimmauld Place, the Muggle world moved. He spent hours watching people who didn't know his name and wouldn't care if they did. Motorcycles, headlights, posters of actors with smiles like freedom. It was a different kind of magic. Only one family member knew. His cousin Andromeda, a few years older, sharp-tongued and burning with the same quiet defiance. She didn't judge him. She shared it. At dinners, they traded smirks, passed notes, whispered of other lives, other names, other futures. They didn't belong, and for a time, they didn't need to. They had each other. But where Andromeda was a question, her sister Bellatrix was a sentence. Her loyalty to the family creed was absolute. She was proud, merciless, and entirely committed to the doctrine of purity. Where Andromeda entertained dreams, Bellatrix enforced discipline. She watched them, always. She told. She reminded them, loudly, coldly, of what the Blacks were and what they were not. Seasons passed. When Andromeda left for Hogwarts, Sirius waited for summer with a strange ache. And so, it was Regulus who stepped into the quiet. 2 years younger, his little brother had once trailed Sirius's every step, eyes wide with adoration, copying his movements, repeating his words, hanging on every tale. He had been earnest, bright, eager to please. But the House of Black had no use for innocence. Regulus changed. He stopped asking questions, stopped sneaking into Sirius's room at night. He learned to mimic their parents, precise, graceful, cold. The son the house could be proud of. The boy destined to sit at the head of the table and call it destiny. Sirius was something else, a force of nature. His magic was wild, raw, unsettling. Even among the proud Blacks, his power stood out. No one's seen talent like that since Bellatrix, someone whispered once. Sirius heard. He always did. Not for praise, but for proof. Proof that he was more than their chains. Regulus became his mother's pride, Sirius her shame. The stray dog at the feast's edge, teeth bared, defiant. While Creature muttered and Walburga shrieked, Sirius grinned, that crooked, infuriating grin. Their fury didn't scare him. It amused him. Their obsession with control made them small. Small could never be great, and greatness would never own him. But everything was about to change. Hogwarts, distant, whispered, was no longer far away. It was the 1st of September, 1971, and when the sorting hat touched his head, it shouted a word no black had worn in centuries. Gryffindor! Gasps echoed through the great hall. Somewhere, a goblet dropped. Sirius stood, stiff-backed, and walked to the Gryffindor table without flinching. He didn't look at the Slytherin table. He didn't need to. The stares of his family burned hotter than any curse. To them, it wasn't just a disgrace. It was betrayal. Confirmation of everything they feared he might become. But Sirius didn't care. Because at the Gryffindor table, among the sea of unfamiliar faces, he spotted one that made him grin. A boy with wind-swept black hair, glasses askew, and an irreverent gleam in his eye. James Potter. They'd met on the train, sharing a compartment and a contraband stash of cauldron cakes. Within minutes, they'd been laughing like old friends, mocking the prefects and speculating loudly about which rules were most fun to break. The bond had been instant, effortless, two sparks finding each other in a forest full of dry kindling. James, it turned out, came from a well-off wizarding family who had made their fortune thanks to the Sleekeazy's hair potion and scalp treatment, which was rather poetic, really, given that James's own hair was perhaps the most stubborn, rebellious thing about him. Apparently, some problems run in the blood, and others inspire an entire product line. If Sirius's family was scandalized, they weren't quiet about it. Letters arrived thick with disappointment and veiled threats. His mother called it a grotesque betrayal. His father spoke of legacy and bloodline like curses. But for the first time in his life, Sirius didn't have to listen. Because Hogwarts wasn't just a school. It was an escape. A castle vast enough to get lost in. Ancient enough to hide things no adult could monitor. Magical enough to feel like anything was possible. Its walls didn't whisper of duty or disgrace. They whispered of secrets, of laughter echoing down moving staircases, of friends waiting in corners you hadn't found yet. And Sirius was finally free to be who he was, not who he was meant to be. He and James became inseparable. Together they unraveled Hogwarts like a map made just for them. They snuck into the kitchens, befriended ghosts, invented secret codes and elaborate dares, and collected detentions like trophies. It didn't take long for their names to become a kind of legend. Brilliant, reckless, and always together. They weren't just students. They were marauders in the making. But Sirius and James weren't alone for long. There was also Peter Pettigrew, short, round-faced, and perpetually out of breath, as if the world moved just a little too fast for him. He was the sort of boy you'd forget in a lineup, the one whose hand went half raised in class and then slowly sank again. But for all his hesitations, Peter had something that mattered. He adored them. To him, Sirius and James weren't just classmates. They were icons, living, breathing proof that brilliance and bravery could be loud, funny, and wildly disobedient. Peter followed them like a shadow with bad posture. And while he wasn't particularly gifted with a wand, he was eager, loyal, and absolutely terrified of disappointing them. There was a sort of hunger in him, to belong, to matter. And the closer he stayed to James and Sirius, the more he felt like he did. Then there was Remus. Remus Lupin didn't seek the spotlight. In fact, he seemed to shrink from it. Quiet, bookish, always pale and a little tired, with eyes that looked older than they should. He had the kind of presence you only noticed when the room went quiet. But Sirius noticed him. Everyone did, eventually. Not because he tried to stand out, quite the opposite, but because there was something behind his calm, a storm trying not to show. No one knew where he disappeared to every month. He always came back more tired, more withdrawn. Excuses were made. Sick relatives, strange flus, sudden migraines. But James and Sirius were many things, and oblivious wasn't one of them. When they figured it out, when they realized what Remus was, Sirius thought he might be scared, but he wasn't, and neither were the others. Instead, they laughed, called him Moony, joked about fleas, and even scratched behind his ears, teasing him, the same way Sirius and James always teased each other. It was affection, real and unspoken. Their way of saying, "We're friends, all right?" For Remus, it changed everything. The full moon wasn't a secret to hide anymore. It was a night like any other, spent with friends, planning pranks instead of hiding alone. He didn't come back to silence and fear. He came back to faces that understood, to a place where he belonged. And so the four of them, Sirius Black, James Potter, Peter Pettigrew, and Remus Lupin, became something more than classmates. They became a pact, a promise. They were the Marauders now. Time passed quickly at Hogwarts, as it often does when the halls echo with laughter and secrets, and the nights leave little room for sleep. Before long, Sirius's younger brother, Regulus, arrived at school. He was sorted into Slytherin without hesitation, earning silent nods of approval from their parents. It was exactly as it should have been, at least in their eyes. Brilliant. Sirius, meanwhile, came home for the holidays with the defiance of someone who no longer cared to hide it. His bedroom wall was soon covered in posters of Muggle pin-ups and motorbikes, wedged between Quidditch flyers that no one in the family cared about. On the shelves, rows of toy vehicles, mostly motorbikes, sat beside magazines filled with engines, speed, and smoke. His parents said nothing, but the silence that followed was never empty. It was charged, cold, and growing heavier with every passing year. At school, the divide between the brothers deepened. Blood may have bound them, but little else did. Regulus moved in carefully curated circles, boys with crisp uniforms and colder smiles, who spoke in whispers about bloodlines and loyalty. Many of them would one day wear the dark mark. Sirius couldn't have chosen a path further from that. With James at his side, his star only burned brighter. The two were inseparable, unstoppable, Gryffindor's twin comets. The school's official records are vague on the matter, but it's widely believed that Sirius played beater for the Gryffindor Quidditch team, while James was their prized chaser. Ask anyone who was around back then, they'll tell you it was true. The girls loved them. The boys either tried to compete or just moaned about them from the sidelines. One of those who complained was Severus Snape, a Slytherin boy with greasy hair, pale skin, and eyes that looked sharp enough to cut. They had met on the Hogwarts Express their very first day and clashed before the sweets trolley had even arrived. From that moment, it was animosity with no breaks. Snape was sharp, no question, and he nursed a grudge like a wounded animal. James, ever the showman, had dubbed him Snivelus, a name that clung to him like mildew and refused to wash off. Snape, in turn, made it his mission to track them down. He lingered in the halls, always lurking, notebook in hand, ready to pounce on any slip-up. He wasn't bold enough to confront them face to face, but he never missed a chance to tip off Filch or hide behind a suit of armor to eavesdrop. He wasn't a real threat, more a persistent nuisance, unwanted, unrelenting, always there. As the years passed at Hogwarts and adolescence took its toll, lycanthropy became harder and harder for Remus to manage and to endure. To ensure his safety and that of his peers, the boy was taken to a shack each month during his transformations, locked away to prevent him from attacking other students. But that isolation slowly broke something in him. His howls of pain and rage echoed through the village of Hogsmeade, and the locals, unaware of the truth, began to believe the shack was haunted by violent ghosts. Rather than deny it, Dumbledore encouraged the rumors, and the Shrieking Shack gained its infamous reputation as the most haunted building in Britain. Back then, the Wolfsbane potion didn't exist. Every full moon was a battle Remus faced alone, a battle that left him more withdrawn, gaunt, and silent with each passing month. Watching this, Sirius couldn't take it anymore. Seeing his friend vanish into pain and shame, something lit inside him. A wild idea, mad maybe, but worth trying. What if, On full moon nights, he, James, and Peter could become animals too. Maybe then Remus wouldn't be alone. Maybe the beast inside him would feel less like a monster and more like a pack. Of course, it was almost impossible. Becoming an animagus was a magical feat so complex that most adult wizards wouldn't even attempt it. But Sirius didn't care. He convinced James and Peter, and together they began studying the ritual in secret. They spent 3 years hiding ingredients, whispering incantations, waiting for the right storms. One mistake could have meant disaster, but they didn't stop. Sirius was the first. One night in 5th year, he transformed into a great black dog, fast, silent, and powerful. A few weeks later, James followed, becoming a stag. Peter, after much struggling, became a rat. From that night on, everything changed. Every full moon, the 3 of them would sneak out under James's invisibility cloak, slip past the Whomping Willow, and meet Remus in the Shrieking Shack. They couldn't stop the transformation, but they could ease the pain. The wolf was still there, wild and dangerous, but it wasn't alone anymore. And so, little by little, the boy behind the beast began to return. But they didn't stop there. Once they learned to move through the grounds unseen, they started exploring. Hogwarts by night, Hogsmeade by moonlight, the forest, the hills, even the castle's deepest secrets. They memorized every trick staircase, every vanishing step, every hidden tunnel. And from that mischief, an idea was born. A map. Not just any map, a masterpiece. Magical, sarcastic, and impossibly precise. Built using the homunculus charm and infused with their jokes and each member's unique personality, it showed every corner of the school and every person within it. An enchantment of staggering complexity, and in the right hands, a tool as powerful as it was ingenious. When it was finished, they signed it with pride. Moony, Wormtail, Padfoot, and Prongs. That was their name now. Padfoot, yes. To Sirius, no name had ever felt more like him. A declaration, a legacy, a joke, maybe, but one that outlived them all. No one knows exactly how it happened, but it's said that the map was later confiscated by good old Argus Filch, likely thanks to yet another tip-off from Snape, who had grown increasingly obsessed with getting James expelled. But none of that mattered to Sirius, because in the end, the real magic wasn't the map, it was them. What they'd done, what they'd become, his real family. Their days at Hogwarts had come to an end, but the bond forged in those ancient corridors remained unbroken. Sirius Black still carried a flicker of hope in his eyes, though the shadows lengthened around him. The war, once spoken of only in hushed tones, had erupted into open chaos. What the Daily Prophet, decades later, would call the First Wizarding War was no longer a fear or a whisper. It was reality. Even Albus Dumbledore, headmaster of the Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry, as well as the era's most revered wizard and the man who had once vanquished Gellert Grindelwald, seemed weighed down by the grim tide rising before them. The name Voldemort, still rarely uttered, cast a pall over even the boldest hearts. But Sirius wasn't afraid of the name. He hurled it like an insult, as if the very syllables were poison he refused to swallow. The Dark Lord, in a way, embodied everything his family had always believed in, everything he had fought against, all his life. Those who stood against pure blood supremacy and the persecution of Muggleborns were hunted without mercy.
Imagine that Voldemort's powerful now. You don't know who his supporters are. You don't know who's working for him and who isn't. You know he can control people so that they do terrible things without being able to stop themselves. You're scared for yourself and your family and your friends. Every week news comes of more deaths, more disappearances, more torturing. The Ministry of Magic's in disarray. They don't know what to do. They're trying to keep everything hidden from the Muggles, but meanwhile, Muggles are dying too. Terror everywhere, panic, confusion. That's how it used to be.
Voldemort's followers, the Death Eaters, wielded dark magic with chilling purpose. The unforgivable curses, outlawed for centuries, returned with brutal frequency, and his cousin Bellatrix at the forefront. Perhaps the Dark Lord's most loyal and lethal servant. Meanwhile, the Black family let rivers of gold galleons flow into Death Eater pockets, secretly funding the war. Sirius couldn't simply stand by and do nothing. While his best friend James, who had changed in their final school years, becoming a more mature person and setting aside old grudges with Severus Snape, now a Death Eater, was enjoying a happy time alongside his partner, the brilliant Lily Evans. Sirius could already feel the distant echo of an oncoming storm. But then came the wedding, and for one day, even young Black, who stood proudly as best man, chose to set all that darkness aside. That day was for celebration. That day was for smiling. For that one day, life was beautiful. And then, at the wedding, alongside Remus, there was Peter Pettigrew. To Sirius, he had been like a brother. At Hogwarts, they had shielded him, lifted him, saved him from more scrapes than he could count. But Peter had always been the quiet one, the uncertain one, less gifted perhaps, more eager to please than to lead. Yet Sirius had begun to sense a change in him. In that atmosphere of war, Peter seemed to shrink beside James's courage, Remus's brilliance, Sirius's own prowess. Beyond the fear, it was as if he ached to matter, to be seen, to stand taller than his shadow. But perhaps, deep down, it had only been a feeling, a fleeting impression. It was an autumn day, in 1977, when everything changed for James, Lily, Sirius, and the others. A message arrived. Sealed with utmost secrecy, Albus Dumbledore summoned them.
There is a group,
He said.
a secret society formed to resist Voldemort's growing threat, unrecognized by the Ministry, but believed in by many, the Order of the Phoenix.
For years, rumors had whispered of witches and wizards who dared stand against the Dark Lord and his Death Eaters. Now at last, the invitation was real. The Order had been founded quietly in 1970, when the war was still in its early tremors. Dumbledore, long aware of Tom Riddle's descent into something far more dangerous than Grindelwald, knew what was coming. Over time, trusted auras joined the cause, striking quietly from the shadows. Sirius, along with his closest friends, answered the call. They became part of something greater, something deadly. At last, Sirius knew he would be able to prove his worth. At last, he could make his contribution to change things. But despite their skill and careful planning, the price they paid was devastating. The Bones family was almost entirely wiped out. Benji Fenwick, Marlene McKinnon, brilliant and brave, were murdered without mercy. Then came the turn of the Prewett brothers. And yet, the Order endured. Among them was Alastor Moody, the legendary Auror, feared and respected for his unyielding methods, having sent more Death Eaters to Azkaban than any other, though he struck only when necessary. Others followed, Frank and Alice Longbottom, former Hogwarts classmates, whose skill and courage earned them the particular hatred of Bellatrix Lestrange, his ruthless cousin. Sirius's veins boiled with rage. He always gave everything, always on the front lines, always at James and Lily's side, one skirmish after another, one ambush after the next. And yet, why did it always seem to be the innocent who paid the price? He sometimes wondered how his cousin Andromeda was doing, and his brother, Regulus. Who knew? Sirius would spend hours lost in thought, watching the world around him. And Peter, always there to reassure him, always with the right words at the right time. Peter was a good lad. But after so much darkness, after a long and weary summer, came the autumn of 1979. A light. Lily was expecting a child, Harry. Sirius could hardly contain his smile. The Marauders celebrated. Perhaps, after all, this was what it was all for. The war, the pain, the sacrifices. They were doing it for this, for those who would come after, for those who deserved a better world, for little Harry Potter.
Little Harry.
An unexpected piece of news, however, would change the course of everything. The Dark Lord had learned of a prophecy, a chilling foretelling that spoke of a child born in July, destined to bring about his downfall. That child was their son, or so he believed. The warning came from an unlikely source, a Death Eater, Severus Snape. Beneath his cold allegiance, something still flickered, a love for Lily Potter that had never truly died. Desperate to save her, he turned against his master. He went to Dumbledore, revealed what he knew, and pledged his loyalty to the Order of the Phoenix. Sirius, however, was never one to forgive easily. James might have been willing to believe in Snape's remorse, but Sirius remained wary. Could a man so steeped in darkness truly be trusted? Was this just another ploy? Still, Sirius trusted Dumbledore without question, and for the Potter's sake, he set his grudges aside. Marked and hunted, James and Lily had little choice. They withdrew into the shadows of Godric's Hollow, a quiet village steeped in old magic and watchful allies. But hiding required more than distance. Dumbledore urged them to use the Fidelius Charm, a spell so powerful it could conceal their location within the soul of a single person, the Secret Keeper. Only that individual could reveal the truth, willingly or not. No spell, no curse, no amount of force could extract it. It was perfect protection. But perfection, as they would soon learn, is a fragile thing in the hands of men.
An immensely complex spell involving the magical concealment of a secret inside a single living soul. The information is hidden inside the chosen person, or secret keeper, and is henceforth impossible to find. Unless, of course, the secret keeper chooses to divulge it. As long as the secret keeper refused to speak, you know who could search the village where Lily and James were staying for years and never find them. Not even if he had his nose pressed against their sitting room window.
James and Lily had no doubts. Sirius would be their secret keeper. Loyal, unshakable, their dearest friend. But Sirius thought differently. Determined to outwit Voldemort, he proposed a daring switch. They would name Peter Pettigrew instead. Who would ever suspect Peter? Timid, unremarkable Peter, the last person anyone would look to. Sirius was the obvious choice. Always on the front lines, always at James's side. He'd be the first they'd try to break. And there were rumors, whispers of a spy within the Order. No one could be fully trusted. Perhaps, Sirius thought, this was Peter's chance. The moment he'd long been waiting for. A chance to prove himself. Everyone agreed. The charm was cast. And so, the fate of the wizarding world was sealed. That summer lingered, warm and golden. On the 31st of July, 1980, Harry Potter was born. Within the quiet sanctuary of Godric's Hollow, the Potters poured their hearts into those first precious months. Hidden from the world, they lived for their son, his first smile, his first laugh, his tiny hands gripping theirs. Love filled the rooms of that little cottage. Laughter echoed through its halls. So reads a letter written by Lily to Sirius during those days, later found by Harry many years after.
Dear Padfoot, thank you. Thank you for Harry's birthday present. It was his favourite by far. 1 year old and already zooming along on a toy broomstick. He looked so pleased with himself. I'm enclosing a picture so you can see. You know it only rises about 2 feet off the ground, but he nearly killed the cat and he smashed a horrible vase Petunia sent me for Christmas. No complaints there. Of course, James thought it was funny. Says he's going to be a great Quidditch player. But we've had to pack away all the ornaments and make sure we don't take our eyes off him when he gets going. We had a very quiet birthday tea, just us and old Bathilda, who has always been sweet to us, and who dotes on Harry.
We were so sorry you couldn't come, but the Order's got to come first, and Harry's not old enough to know it's his birthday anyway.
James is getting a bit frustrated shut up here. He tries not to show it, but I can tell. Also, Dumbledore's still got his invisibility cloak, so no chance of little excursions. If you could visit, it would cheer him up so much. Wormy was here last weekend. I thought he seemed down, but that was probably the news about the McKinnons. I cried all evening when I heard. Bathilda drops in most days. She's a fascinating old thing with the most amazing stories about Dumbledore. I'm not sure he'd be pleased if he knew. I don't know how much to believe, actually, because it seems incredible that Dumbledore could ever have been friends with Gellert Grindelwald. I think her mind's going, personally. Lots of love, Lily.
It was Halloween night, 1981, and it was meant to pass like any other. Dark, quiet, filled with uneasy thoughts, and the lingering warmth of a butterbeer or two shared with Peter. They had planned to meet that evening, he and Sirius, but when the young black found his lodgings deserted, no sign of a struggle. Had Peter disappeared? Was something about to happen? Something terrible? Or perhaps it already had? Within moments, his enchanted motorbike roared into the night, tearing through wind and darkness, towards Godric's Hollow, towards the home of his closest friends. What he found there would haunt him forever. In the silence, two bodies, still silent, guarding the remains of a life that should have been untouched. It was there, before the heart-wrenching cries of little Harry, that Sirius understood. The secret had been betrayed. And apart from Lily and James, only he knew the truth. Peter Pettigrew was the spy. He had betrayed them. He had killed them. The weight of betrayal pressed hard on Sirius's chest, a wound that would never truly heal. Inexplicably, against all logic, the Dark Lord had fallen, defeated by the most innocent of creatures. But at what cost? As James and Lily's chosen godfather to the child, he offered at once to take Harry. But Dumbledore had already made arrangements. Rubeus Hagrid arrived in the early hours, solemn and unyielding, tasked with delivering the child to his only remaining family, Petunia Dursley. For him, it was the best option. He would keep Harry safe, protect him from all this, until he was ready to understand. Sirius said nothing. He simply handed over his flying motorbike, whispering that he would no longer need it.
Just take it.
But grief soon gave way to fury. Peter Pettigrew was still out there, somewhere, and Sirius meant to find him. He did, but too late. Pettigrew had anticipated it. Before Sirius's wand, he begged and pleaded, sobbing, until desperate, at the first chance, he acted swiftly. He caused a blast so powerful it tore through the street, killing 12 muggles. Screams, devastation. In the smoke and rubble, all that remained was a single severed finger. Peter had vanished, transfigured into the rat he truly was. And so the final act of the tragedy was complete. Sirius was seized that very night, branded a traitor, accused of murdering Peter and the Muggles, and of betraying the Potters. He was dragged away without trial, sentenced to Azkaban, remembered for years as the most devoted and dangerous servant the Dark Lord had ever had. In the midst of the North Sea, within the walls of the prison known as Azkaban, once the dwelling of Ecristis, Sirius Black waited for time to pass. Sooner or later, he knew he would die, and that was fine. The Dark Lord had fallen. Most likely, little Harry, despite everything, would be safe, and his own life held little meaning anymore. The torment of losing his dearest friends gnawed at him from within, down to his very bones. But his thoughts were not only with them. No, there was another person who, deep inside, held a place in his heart. That fool, his brother, Regulus, dead. Nearly 2 years by then. No one truly knew what had happened. The official story was vague. Regulus Arcturus Black had died young, loyal to Voldemort until the very end. A footnote in a war that had already claimed too much. Forgotten. Dismissed. But Sirius wasn't so sure. Outside Hogwarts, the war worsened. Voldemort's grip tightened, and Regulus, like many purebloods, admired him. He spoke of bloodlines and order, convinced that wizard kind must be restored to greatness. Sirius had heard these words all his life, but in Regulus they sounded different. Less cruel, more certain, as if grasping for meaning in a world falling apart. At 16, Regulus bore the dark mark, accepted by his family and sealed by their influence. He became a Death Eater, but the darkness was not what he imagined. Sent away alone on a mission he barely understood, Creature, the Black family house elf, perhaps Regulus's only true friend, returned broken and terrified. The Dark Lord had used the elf to test the protections on a locket he guarded obsessively. What Regulus discovered in the days that followed remains uncertain. He told no one, but he had begun to piece together the truth. The locket was not just precious, it was a Horcrux, a vessel, corrupted and unnatural, that contained a fragment of Voldemort's soul. So he made a choice. With Creature at his side, Regulus would return to the cave. He would retrieve the locket, destroy it, and in its place, he would leave a message.
To the Dark Lord, I know I will be dead long before you read this, but I want you to know that it was I who discovered your secret. I have stolen the real Horcrux and intend to destroy it as soon as I can. I face death, in the hope that when you meet your match, you will be mortal once more. Regulus Arcturus Black.
But Regulus never returned. The cave was guarded by more than enchantments. Beneath its still waters stirred an army of inferi, dead things bound by darkness and commanded to kill. To reach the locket, Regulus was forced to drink a potion that clouded the mind and racked the body. It poisoned thought, blurred time, dragged him towards madness, and still he endured. He gave Creature his final orders. Take the locket, go home, destroy it, if you can. Regulus stayed behind. At just 18 years old, he vanished beneath that black water, swallowed by the very darkness he had once pledged himself to. But Sirius never knew. He never saw the letter, never learned of the cave, the locket, or the sacrifice. All he had was silence, and in Azkaban, that silence was deafening. 12 years passed. Then, at sunrise on one of those endless, meaningless days behind those walls, something happened. Inside the shadowed cell, Sirius Black saw a photograph. It was printed in the Daily Prophet, the Weasley family on holiday in Egypt. But Sirius's eyes weren't on the smiling children or the towering pyramids. They fixed instead on a rat perched on the shoulder of the youngest boy. A rat he could recognize among 1,000. It was him, Peter Pettigrew, still alive, hiding in plain sight. After so long, Sirius may have found the strength he needed, a purpose to live for, a reason to escape. How he did it has long been debated, but most magical historians agree on one secret the Ministry never uncovered. Sirius Black was an unregistered animagus. In the form of a great black dog, his emotions dulled, his thoughts less human, less penetrable to the Dementors patrolling Azkaban's halls. Stripped of strength, but not of will, he slipped past the guards. He vanished into the sea, a ghost returned from the grave. The Ministry was thrown into panic. It was the first known escape in Azkaban's history, or at least, that's what they believed. But while the world reeled from Sirius Black's escape, shadows stirred elsewhere. This next chapter in the legacy of the noble and most ancient House of Black does not follow a wizard, but 3 witches. 3 women, bound by blood and marked by tragedy. The Black Sisters.
Sissy! Andromeda, stop.
This story begins long ago, with the union of 2 noble wizarding houses, the Blacks and the Rosiers. Both were members of the so-called Sacred 28, the elite British families considered truly pure blood by the 1930s. It was in this context that Cygnus Black and Druella Rosier were joined in marriage, likely not for love. Both noble houses, in fact, were in dire need of strengthening their bloodlines and alliances like never before. Only a few years had passed since the end of the global wizarding war and the fall of the infamous dark wizard Gellert Grindelwald. And while this new era promised many things, for purebloods, none of them were particularly good. Tolerance toward muggles was beginning to spread faster than dragonpox, and with it came an ever-growing threat to the preservation of pureblood heritage and magic. Mixed marriages were becoming more common, and more muggle-born witches and wizards were stepping into the wizarding world, further eroding the old ways. Despite everything, both Cygnus and Druella entered their marriage willingly, fully aware of the duty they were fulfilling as heirs to such prestigious dynasties. And so, in 1951, their first daughter was born, Bellatrix. With her dark hair and piercing eyes, it was immediately clear that the child was the embodiment of the most distinctive traits of the Black family. Raised with care and affection by her parents, Bellatrix, who quickly revealed an exceptional sharpness and a natural talent for magic, was groomed to become an extraordinary witch, fiercely proud of her pure blood heritage. In contrast to her, Andromeda, just a few years younger, seemed cut from an entirely different cloth. In some ways, her features resembled Bellatrix's, but her brown hair and lighter eyes framed a gaze that conveyed serenity and a genuine enthusiasm for the smallest of things. Although her magical abilities proved to be every bit as impressive as her older sisters from the very start, Andromeda seemed hardly interested in them. More than once, her questions, asked with a mix of innocence and sharpness, would infuriate Bellatrix and their parents. Her curiosity often challenged the family's expectations, particularly their extreme pure blood ideology. Born in 1955, there was finally the third and youngest sister, Narcissa. Their mother adored her, often spending entire nights rocking the little one to sleep while softly singing an ancient lullaby passed down through generations in the Black family. Blonde hair, ice blue eyes, and skin as pale as snow. It took little more than a glance to see how Narcissa was, outwardly, the opposite of her older sister Bellatrix. Yet, in everything else, the two felt as alike and inseparable as could be. If Bella protected Sissy from trouble, Sissy helped Bella become sharper and less impulsive. Together, they never missed a chance to mock the ruined gatherings of Andromeda and her inseparable little cousin, Sirius, who was always eager to stir up trouble. Bellatrix had learned from her father that Aunt Walburga was extremely concerned about Sirius's fascination with Muggle vehicles, which the boy found incredibly captivating. It must be said, however, that Andromeda loved to stir the pot and feed such gossip to the family. Seeing their eyes widen at the mere mention of the word Muggle was an endlessly satisfying spectacle. Despite their differences, however, one thing remained undeniable. The three sisters shared a deep and unshakable bond of affection. The days passed, and with the arrival of the summer of 1962 came Bellatrix's official invitation to attend the Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry. And so, Cygnus and Druella knew the time had come. On a warm August morning, the two parents gathered their three daughters to present them with an object they claimed to be of utmost importance. It was a box, crafted partly from goblin-wrought silver. Now that their eldest would be heading to Hogwarts, they said, this box would symbolize their sisterhood. Soon, all three of them would be witches in their own right, and more than ever, it would be crucial that their bond remained unbroken. The box was divided into 3 sections, so that each of them, during their future years at Hogwarts, could hide within it something that, to them, would represent the most treasured of memories. And if at any point in the future they wished to reopen the box, they would have to do so together. Each of them would need to seal one of the 3 locks with a specific charm, one that each would keep secret until the time came when they would decide together to unlock it. The sisters promised their parents that nothing and no one would ever come between them. They would remain united, always. The House of Black took great pride in claiming that, for generations, every member of their family had been chosen by the Sorting Hat to join Slytherin at Hogwarts. And after Bellatrix, who was sorted without hesitation, Andromeda followed a few years later. It is said, however, that the hat was more uncertain with her, and it's likely that Slytherin was chosen at her insistence. Perhaps deep down, Andromeda didn't want to disappoint her family. Perhaps she didn't want to disappoint her elder sister. Or maybe she simply wanted to stay close to her, despite everything. As expected, Narcissa followed her two sisters into Slytherin, and for those first years at Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry, their bond only grew stronger, one fond memory after another. At the castle, each of the three sisters had the chance to hone their skills and nurture their talents. Bellatrix, in particular, quickly proved to be a brilliant duelist, thanks in part to the rigorous training in the dark arts her parents had subjected her to from a young age. It didn't take long for Bellatrix to claim the top spot in the school's dueling club. If Bella excelled in defense against the dark arts, Andromeda was perhaps the brightest charm student of her year. In particular, she displayed unparalleled talent in healing magic. A more amusing anecdote tells of how she would use her mastery of spells to annoy her messier dorm mates, proving to be exceptionally skilled in cleanliness and household charms. According to her future daughter, Nymphadora, Andromeda was extraordinarily adept at the pack charm, effortlessly getting items to fit neatly into place, even coaxing socks to fold themselves. Narcissa, on the other hand, like Bellatrix, quickly showed her aptitude for the dark arts. Although she wasn't as exceptional a duelist as her sister, Bella soon noticed her natural talent for occlumency, the magic that shields one's mind from legilimency, preventing others from accessing or influencing thoughts and feelings. But Narcissa's heart did not beat for the dark arts like her sister's, for unexpectedly, a feeling she had never known before began to surprise her little by little. His name was Lucius, and his charm and gentle manners had won the girl's heart. Moreover, not only was he a fellow Slytherin, but he was also one of the brightest students at Hogwarts, with a promising career ahead of him, and the heir to one of the most important families among the Sacred 28, the Malfoys. Surely her parents could have no objections. When Bellatrix and Andromeda learned of little Sissy's engagement, they could do nothing but be happy for her. But as we know, love, when it's real, is not a feeling one can command. It was an autumn day when Andromeda, engrossed in her studies, received an enchanted note. The girl was taken completely by surprise. It was a declaration of love. Edward Tonks, known to everyone as Ted, a Hufflepuff boy she had occasionally chatted with, but whom she had never thought much of. Or maybe she was wrong.
For Merlin's sake.
Half in jest, half for fun, Andromeda agreed to go out with Ted, who surprised her with his enthusiasm and his outlook on the world. She had never really explored the perspective of a Muggle-born wizard before. He told her the most absurd things. Who could ever believe that the most popular sport among Muggles wasn't Quidditch, but a ridiculous game called soccer? Andromeda couldn't stop laughing. Being with Ted reminded her so much of the days spent with her cousin Sirius. Being with him had shown her how much, in those last few years, she had conformed to become the Slytherin witch the Black family had raised her to be. In order not to break a bond, she had chosen to be the sister that Bella and Sissy wanted her to be. First with Sirius, now with Ted, Andromeda had remembered what it meant to be herself. It was in that moment that the girl realized it was time to fill the keepsake box her parents had given her. She was happy, happier than she had been in a long time. The letter Ted had sent her that day, declaring his love, as well as the flower he had given her on their first date, represented the most precious memory, not just because it symbolized her love, but because it represented her true self. And so it was, after sealing her own item inside the box, that Andromeda realized she was the last of the three sisters to place her treasure within. What had Bellatrix and Narcissa sealed away? Perhaps one day she would find out. Perhaps. Andromeda had made her choice, and her sisters needed to know. If their bond was truly genuine, if it wasn't just a facade, they would understand. And so, she told them the truth. She and Ted Tonks, a Muggle-born, had fallen in love. If Narcissa's eyes revealed fear and uncertainty, Bellatrix's gaze showed nothing but pure hatred.
You're not my sister,
she spat, her voice dripping with contempt. But Andromeda stood strong, unyielding. As much as the pain shattered her heart, she was ready to face the consequences of her choice. Deep down, she had always known that her family would never understand, not even her sisters. When the news reached them that summer, Cygnus and Druella ordered their daughter to sever ties with that filthy mudblood who, in their eyes, not only tarnished their name, but would forever disgrace the proud, pure blood heritage of their house. But Andromeda didn't care. And so, shortly after the end of her 7th year at Hogwarts, when she announced her marriage to Edward Tonks, the inevitable happened. Andromeda Black was disinherited. Her name was burned off the family tapestry at number 12 Grimmauld Place and permanently erased from the family tree. For the Black family, Andromeda had never existed. Bellatrix and Narcissa never spoke to her again. Andromeda had betrayed them, just as she had betrayed everything they had been raised to uphold. Why dishonor their origins? Why disgrace their very magical nature by mingling their noble blood with something so filthy and unnatural? For the Blacks, pity could not be tolerated, and so their sisterhood came to an end. After their marriage in 1973, Andromeda and Ted had a daughter, Nymphadora, a name chosen by her mother. The little girl, who would later be sorted into Hufflepuff, just like her father, would go down in history as one of the most promising and skilled Aurors. Her heroic deeds would become foundational during the rise of the Dark Lord in the Second Wizarding War. Narcissa, to her delight, married Lucius, with whom she was able to have a male heir, Draco. Bellatrix eventually married Rodolphus Lestrange, a fellow wealthy pure-blood and Slytherin, driven by the obligation to uphold her family's pro-pure-blood mentality and traditions. Unlike her sisters, however, she never showed any love or affection toward her husband. She never spoke of him in conversation, nor did she bear him any children. When the First Wizarding War broke out, Bellatrix and her husband became Death Eaters, as did Lucius, fighting for the Dark Lord. To Bellatrix, he represented a new era, a chance to safeguard the purity of her family once and for all. It is unclear why, but unlike Bella and Lucius, Narcissa never officially became a Death Eater, perhaps preferring instead to focus on her family and the upbringing of little Draco. Demonstrating her loyalty and skill, the Dark Lord chose Bellatrix to be one of his closest servants, personally training her in the most powerful and secretive dark arts. Even after his defeat at the hands of the infant Harry Potter, Bellatrix remained more faithful to him than anyone else. After the fall of the Dark Lord, the witch felt every certainty and hope crumble. It couldn't end like this. It shouldn't. On October 31st, 1981, Bellatrix and a group of Voldemort's followers managed to avoid capture and execution. In their desperate bid to find and revive their master, the group kidnapped 2 Aurors and members of the Order of the Phoenix, Alice and Frank Longbottom, who had just become parents to Neville Longbottom. It was against them that Bellatrix unleashed every ounce of her despair and fury. With violence, the Cruciatus curse was unleashed upon the couple, tortured to the brink of exhaustion. Bellatrix sought information about the whereabouts of the Dark Lord, information the Longbottoms could never have known. The pain, pushed beyond any limit, drove the couple to madness. Frank and Alice were placed in the Janus Thicky ward for irreversible spell damage at St. Mungo's Hospital for magical maladies and injuries, and due to the extreme torture they endured, they were left unaware that they had a son together. This crime ignited a wave of fury across the wizarding community, so intense that the Ministry of Magic faced critical pressure to apprehend those responsible. When Bellatrix was captured, she was tried before the Council of Magical Law and sentenced to life imprisonment in Azkaban. Unlike many other Death Eaters, she did not deny her loyalty, Bellatrix proudly declared her unwavering allegiance to Voldemort and insisted she would wait for his return. Years went by, and in 1986, Andromeda returned to Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry under unexpected circumstances. Her daughter, Nymphadora, was in her 3rd year, and the invitation to attend a grand ceremony celebrating the school's founding gave Andromeda an opportunity she had long awaited. She resolved to confront her past once and for all by reclaiming the keepsake box her parents had gifted to her and her sisters, which had been lost for many years. With the help of her daughter, Andromeda unraveled the secrets of the enchanted locks after recovering the box, which Bellatrix had meticulously hidden in the dueling club room. Andromeda opened the first lock, her own, by pointing the wand and focusing on her happiest memory. After countless attempts, and with the assistance of Albus Dumbledore, the witch finally uncovered the secret to unlocking her sister's locks. The soft strains of the Black family lullaby opened Narcissa's one, while the elder sisters demanded a blood payment. When the box finally opened, Andromeda gazed upon the most cherished memories her sisters had hidden away. For Sissy, it was the Malfoy family brooch, a gift from Lucius during their courtship, symbolizing her worthiness to join his family. In the end, she too had chosen love. Bellatrix, however, had left no such trace of sentimentality. Whatever her treasure had been, she had ensured its destruction, leaving only a pile of ash behind. What memory were you trying to bury, Bella? Andromeda often found herself silently wondering over the years. Without a word, she gathered the ashes left behind, carefully placing them in a small vial, a token she would carry with her always. Deep in her heart, Andromeda knew the truth. Whatever her sister had sought to destroy, it had been something too profound to truly vanish. No matter their differences, their ideologies, or even the hatred that had come between them, Bellatrix, Andromeda, and Narcissa would always share an unbreakable bond. They were sisters, and nothing could ever change that.
My dear wizards, witches, muggles, and squibs. What a journey through the bloodlines, legacies, and the tangled web of the Sacred 28. Truly, the history of these families is as intricate as it is enlightening. Even the oldest, proudest lineages could not escape the whims of fate, or the occasional spirited toast to tradition. I shall, of course, maintain my impeccable composure, as always. Yes, perfectly composed. Let's say it's purely scholarly enthusiasm. So I bid you farewell, my brave adventurers, until next time, when we shall delve once more into the wonders, the secrets, and the ever-twisting mysteries of the wizarding world. I am, as ever, your ever-charming, utterly sober, of course, Quentin Pentigran. Farewell.